the hearth and the hammer. The village of Stone Creek huddled low in the Greyfang Mountains, perpetually brushed by mist rolling down from the snow-capped peaks, a place where time seemed to move with the deliberate slowness of glacial ice, and in a cottage that seemed more a natural outcrop than a built structure, nestled where the pine forest met the first rocky slopes, lived Eldrin Thorne, a man so old his beard resembled the tangled roots of an ancient oak and whose hands, though gnarled like driftwood, possessed a strength and dexterity that belied their years. Within the thick stone walls of his workshop, perpetually warmed by the immense, soot-blackened forge that dominated its heart, the air hung heavy with the familiar symphony of his existence, the deep-throated whoosh of the bellows coaxing the coals into a pulsating heart of orange and white, the sharp, rhythmic clang-clang-clang of hammer meeting red-hot steel on the heavy anvil, a sound as fundamental to Stone Creek as the rush of the creek itself, mingled with the low crackle of the fire and the faint, almost imperceptible hum that seemed to emanate from the very stones, a resonance only Eldrin seemed attuned to, the whisper of latent magic clinging to tools and materials long steeped in the craft. Eldrin moved through this space with the unconscious grace of long practice, his movements economical, each step, each reach for tongs or quenching bucket, a seamless part of the dance between smith and metal, his faded blue eyes, sharp as newly honed blades beneath bushy white brows, missing nothing. Not the precise shade of orange signifying the steel was ready for folding, not the subtle warp in the billet that needed correction before the next heat, not the faint, almost invisible shimmer dancing along the edge of a half-finished dagger blade resting on the oiled oak workbench, a sign the enchantment he painstakingly woven into the metal during its forging was beginning to settle. The walls of the workshop were a testament to centuries of Thorne craftsmanship, not merely displayed, but integrated, functional, shelves groaning under the weight of peculiar ores glittering with inner light, jars filled with iridescent powders ground from exotic minerals, bundles of strangely hued woods, desiccated herbs hanging from the rafters releasing their earthy perfume when disturbed, and racks holding dozens of blades in various stages of completion, from rough, unshaped blanks to near-finished swords gleaming dully in the forge light, their forms whispering of forgotten battles and oaths sworn under cold stars. Eldrin rarely took commissions anymore, preferring the quiet rhythm of maintaining the tools of the few local woodsmen or farmers, or crafting simple knives imbued with minor blessings, a keen edge that lasted years, resistance to rust, a comforting warmth in the hilt for cold nights. But today was different. Yesterday, as the late autumn sun bled crimson behind the peaks, a rider had come, not from the lowland towns, but from deeper into the high, wild places, a man wrapped in furs smelling of pine resin and snow, his face gaunt, etched with a weariness that spoke of relentless pursuit, and in his eyes, a desperate hope. He bore no gold, only a small, worn leather pouch which, when opened upon Eldrin's scarred worktable, revealed a single, unremarkable grey stone, roughly the size of a pigeon's egg, yet it pulsed with a deep, slow light, like a captive ember, and a feeling of immense, ancient weight filled the small room, causing the flames in the forge to dip momentarily. The rider spoke little, his voice a dry rasp, requesting not a weapon of conquest, but a key, a blade that could resonate with the song locked within the stone, a song that could calm a raging spirit, a spirit bound to a place of power high in the forbidding ice-claw peaks, a spirit whose unrest was tearing the high valleys asunder with unseasonal blizzards and earth tremors. He needed a sword not to kill, but to heal a wound in the world, and he had sought Eldrin, whose name was murmured in tales older than the rider's grandfather, whispered of as the last true forge singer, one who could weave magic into metal not as a wizard casts spells, but as a baker kneads life into dough, an intrinsic part of the making. Eldrin had gazed at the stone for a long time, feeling its deep, resonant thrum travel up his arm bones, a song older than mountains, a song of ice and enduring stone, a melancholy, powerful melody. He felt the immense burden of the task, the fragility of the stone, the near-impossible precision required to craft a vessel capable of channeling such raw, ancient power without shattering, to create a blade that was less a weapon and more a tuning fork for the world's soul. Finally, with a slow nod that seemed to settle the very dust in the workshop, he had accepted the stone and the burden, sending the rider to find shelter and rest in the village, for the work would take time, much time, measured not in days, but in the slow, patient heats of the forge and the even slower, more demanding weaving of enchantment into the steel's very essence. Now, in the gray light of dawn filtering through the single high, small window, Eldrin stood before the cold forge, the writer's stone resting heavily in his palm, its inner glow dim but persistent. The first step was always the foundation, the making of the steel itself, and for this, ordinary iron would not suffice. He moved to a deep chest bound with bands of tarnished silver, unlocking it with a key that hung always around his neck, a key fashioned from a single piece of star metal. Within, nestled in velvet worn thin by centuries, lay his most precious stock, ingots of sky iron, fallen from the heavens generations ago, light yet incredibly strong, slivers of deep earth steel, mined from veins near the world's roots, heavy and resonant, and a small, wrapped bundle of sun-touched copper, for flexibility and to carry the song, selecting specific proportions with hands that remembered the feel and song of each metal blend. Eldrin began the meticulous process of preparing the initial billet, the physical vessel that must first be perfect before the magic could even begin to be sung into it, the rhythmic scraping of file on metal joining the morning chorus of birdsong outside, a sound soon to be drowned by the awakening roar of the forge and the ancient, sleep-inducing music of hammer on steel. Chapter 2, The Anvil Song. The forge roared back to life, a contained inferno that painted Eldrin's weathered face and the stone walls in flickering shades of amber and crimson, the heat washing over him in tangible waves, a familiar embrace that drove the mountain chill deep into the stones. He worked the massive bellows with steady, powerful strokes, each pull feeding the fire's hunger, watching intently as the carefully stacked pieces of sky iron, deep earth steel, and sun-touched copper nestled within the heart of the coals began their transformation, the metals gradually surrendering their solidity, glowing first a sullen red, then bright cherry, then finally achieving the searing, almost painful white-yellow heat that signaled their readiness to become one. Sweat beaded on his brow, instantly evaporating in the dry furnace blast, as he carefully grasped the crucible containing the molten blend with long, fire-blackened tongs, the metal within shimmering like captured liquid sunlight, swirling with veins of deeper orange and flecks of impossible blue. With a grunt of effort, born of decades of repetition, he poured the incandescent stream into the waiting sand mold he'd prepared earlier, a long, narrow trough carved with intricate channels designed to minimize flaws, the molten metal flowing like sluggish, brilliant honey, filling the cavity with a hiss and a shower of sparks that danced briefly before vanishing into the gloom near the rafters. The mold sat, radiating intense heat, as Eldrin banked the forge fire slightly, the workshop plunging into a deeper, red-hued gloom filled with the scent of hot sand and ozone. This was the first birth, the creation of the raw ingot, the chaotic potential from which order would be painstakingly hammered. Hours later, when the mold had cooled sufficiently, Eldrin broke it open with practiced blows from a small hammer, revealing the rough, dark gray ingot within, still warm to the touch, its surface pitted and scarred but solid, humming faintly with the latent energies of its disparate origins. The real work began now, folding and reforging, heating the ingot once more until it glowed a malleable orange. Eldrin lifted it with massive tongs, the weight formidable even for his strong arms, and placed it squarely on the anvil's face, the familiar clang echoing like a struck gong. He raised his primary hammer, its head worn smooth by countless impacts, its hilt polished dark by the grip of generations of thorns, and brought it down with a solid, resonant thud that vibrated up through the stone floor. Rhythm was everything, a language the metal understood. Clang thud, clang thud, clang scrape. As he turned the metal with the tongs, clang thud. Sparks flew like angry fireflies with each blow, briefly illuminating the soot-stained tools hanging nearby. Flatters, fullers, punches, chisels, each with its specific purpose in shaping the stubborn material. He worked the length of the billet, drawing it out, lengthening it, feeling the steel yield beneath the hammer, its internal structure compacting, aligning. Then, when it began to cool and stiffen, losing its malleable glow, back into the roaring heart of the forge it went, emerging again and again, hotter, softer, ready for more shaping. After several heats, when the billet was long and relatively uniform, he folded it, heating it to welding heat, a near-white incandescence. He deftly bent it back upon itself, hammering the fold closed with rapid, precise blows, welding the layers together, trapping slag and impurities between them to be hammered out later. This process, heating, hammering, folding, reheating, repeated endlessly, 10 times, 20 times, each fold multiplying the layers, refining the steel, driving out imperfections, aligning the grain, and crucially, weaving the disparate songs of the sky iron, deep earth steel, and sun copper into a single, harmonious potential within the metal's crystalline structure. Eldrin worked in a near trance, his world reduced to the heat on his face, the weight of the hammer in his hand, the sound of impact, the feel of the yielding steel through the tongs, the sight of the color shifting from dull red through orange to yellow white and back again. The rider's stone sat on a small stand near the anvil, its pulsing light seeming to synchronize faintly with the rhythm of the hammer, a deep, slow beat beneath the sharper percussion of the forge. Sometimes, during the brief rests between heats, as he banked the fire or took a sip of water from a chipped clay mug, Eldrin would rest a calloused finger lightly on the stone, closing his eyes, listening not with his ears, but with his bones, his spirit, to the ancient song trapped within, trying to understand its cadence, its peaks and troughs, its sorrow and its enduring strength, knowing this melody must ultimately resonate through the blade he was forging, become its core vibration, the workshop filled with the hypnotic, repetitive symphony, the roar of the fire, the gasp of the bellows, the metallic clang thud scrape of the hammer, the hiss of steam when water was sprinkled to test the heat, the low, resonant hum growing ever so slightly stronger within the folded billet with each cycle. Outside, the mountain day faded into dusk, then into star-studded night, the chill seeping back around the edges of the door, but within, the forge remained the sun, and Eldrin, its tireless priest, continued his patient liturgy, folding time and magic into the lengthening bar of steel, layer upon layer, note upon note, building the foundation upon which the key to calming the raging spirit would be built, the rhythmic monotony a profound lullaby for the world beyond his door. Chapter 3, The Shape Emerges. Days bled into one another, marked only by the consumption of charcoal, the shortening of the massive candle Eldrin used to gauge long stretches of work, and the slow, almost imperceptible transformation of the folded billet. The chaotic, pitted ingot was gone, replaced by a long, slender bar of steel, its surface still rough from the hammer but showing a promising uniformity, a subtle, latent sheen beneath the forged scale that clung stubbornly to its surface. The song within it was stronger now, a low, resonant thrum Eldrin could feel vibrating the tongs when he held it, a harmonious blend of the sky iron's lightness, the deep earth steel's solid base, and the sun copper's bright, flexible chime. It was time to give it form, to move from potential to purpose. Eldrin studied the rider's stone again, its internal ember pulsing slowly, steadily. The blade needed to be a conduit, not a cleaver. It required elegance, balance, a shape that spoke of focus and resonance rather than brute force. He envisioned a long, slightly tapering blade, double-edged but with a profile more akin to a slender spatha than a heavy broadsword, a gentle curve leading to a sharp, defined point, the fuller running deep and true down its center, not just to lighten it, but to act as a channel for the song. The hilt would be long enough for 2 hands, necessary for control when channeling such power, but not cumbersome, sketching the final design not on parchment, but in his mind's eye with the clarity of decades of experience. Eldrin began the delicate process of drawing out the blade's shape. This required different hammers and a more nuanced touch. The heavy, flattening blows gave way to lighter, more precise strikes using a cross-peen hammer, carefully drawing the steel thinner and longer from the tang area towards the point, constantly turning the billet, maintaining symmetry, feeling the metal flow under his guidance. He defined the central ridge, carefully hammering the edges down to create the beginnings of the bevels that would become the cutting edges. The heat management was crucial now. Too hot, and the steel would burn, losing its integrity. Too cold, and it might crack under the stress. Eldrin watched the color like a hawk, pulling the blade from the fire at the exact moment of perfect orange-yellow malleability, working swiftly and surely before the heat bled away. Tink 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 tink, the sound shifted, becoming sharper, more focused, a staccato counterpoint to the forge's bass roar. Sparks flew in shorter, brighter bursts. He used specialized tools, a flatter to smooth surfaces after rough shaping, a fuller set into the anvil's hardy hole to begin carving the deep central groove with careful, angled blows, each impact sending a visible ripple down the length of the hot steel. The rough outline of the blade emerged from the bar like a sculpture revealed from stone, crude yet undeniably purposeful. After each shaping heat, he would normalize the steel, heating it to a specific critical temperature just beyond non-magnetic and then letting it cool slowly in the air away from the forge, a process that relieved internal stresses built up during hammering, ensuring the blade wouldn't warp or crack catastrophically later. It was slow, painstaking work, demanding absolute concentration. The mountain air grew colder outside, frost etching intricate patterns on the small window, but the forge's heat and Eldrin's focus created a timeless bubble within the workshop. Occasionally, he would pause, laying the warm, partially shaped blade flat on the anvil, and place the writer's stone gently upon it near the tang. He would close his eyes, listening. Sometimes, he would hear a faint harmonic, a sympathetic vibration between the stone's deep song and the nascent resonance within the steel, a sign he was on the right path. Other times, a discordant note would jar him, prompting him to adjust his next sequence of heats or hammer blows, perhaps thinning a section slightly more, or adjusting the curve of the fuller. It was a dialogue, conducted not with words, but with heat, force, and intuition, the smith listening to the whispers of both stone and steel, guiding the form to match the function, the physical shape becoming a carefully tuned resonator for the ancient power it must channel. The blade grew longer, sleeker, its edges straighter, its point sharper, the fuller deepening into a clean, dark line down its center. The tang, the part that would be gripped within the hilt, remained thick and robust, a solid anchor for the elegant, singing length of steel that was slowly emerging, hour by hour, heat by heat, from the rhythm of the hammer and the breath of the forge, the hypnotic repetition of the process deepening the quiet within the workshop, a cocoon of heat and sound that pushed the outside world and its worries far away. Chapter 4, The Quench and the Whisper. The blade blank was complete, its form fully realized in rough steel, lying heavy and dark on the anvil, a long, lethal silhouette promising both elegance and purpose. The fuller ran true and deep. The edges, though still rough and unsharpened, showed clean lines tapering to a needle point. The tang solid and square, but it was still soft, malleable, lacking the hardness necessary for an edge or the resilience to hold enchantment. Now came the most critical, most dangerous phase, hardening and tempering. Eldrin felt the familiar mix of profound focus and deep respect, even a flicker of apprehension, that always accompanied this ritual. One mistake here, a fraction of a second too long in the fire, an uneven heat, an impurity missed during folding, a quench that was too violent or too slow, could shatter months of work in an instant, leaving nothing but shards of useless metal. He prepared the quenching bath meticulously. This wasn't simple water or oil. In a deep, stone trough beside the forge, Eldrin mixed his quenching medium, pure snowmelt water gathered from a sacred spring high in the Ice Claw Peaks, water that remembered cold and stillness blended with oil pressed from the nuts of the evergreen ironwood trees, oil that carried resilience and a slow, steady burn, and finally, a careful measure of powdered moonstone, ground to an iridescent dust that shimmered like captured starlight as he stirred it in, the mixture releasing a sharp, clean, slightly metallic scent. This concoction was designed not just to harden, but to temper the shock of transition, to allow the magic woven into the steel a pathway to survive the violence of quenching. He checked the bath's temperature, cool, but not cold. Then, he turned his full attention to the forge, stoking it fiercely until the coals glowed with an almost blinding white heat. He placed the blade carefully into the very heart of the inferno, positioning it so the heat would be as even as possible along its length. Time seemed to stretch, thin and brittle. Eldrin watched the color change with the intensity of a hawk sighting prey. The steel darkened, then glowed dull red, then bright cherry, then orange, finally reaching the crucial, searing yellow-white heat, just on the cusp of becoming molten, the color uniform along the entire length of the blade. This was the moment. Holding his breath, a silent prayer to the spirits of fire and metal on his lips, Eldrin snatched the blade from the forge with his longest tongs. The incandescent steel hissed violently in the air, trailing sparks. In one smooth, swift, decisive motion, he plunged the entire blade, point first, deep into the prepared quenching bath. The reaction was instantaneous and violent. A tremendous hissssssssssssssssssssssss roared through the workshop, louder than the forge, as a great cloud of superheated steam erupted, billowing upwards, filling the space with a thick, pungent fog smelling of hot metal, ozone, burnt oil, and something strangely like frost. Eldrin held the blade submerged, utterly still, feeling the intense vibrations shuddering up the tongs, listening to the furious boil of the liquid around the steel, watching the color vanish instantly from yellow-white to a dull, dead black. The seconds crawled by, the hissing subsided from a roar to a furious bubbling, then to a resentful simmer. Only when the last bubble ceased and the surface of the bath lay still, reflecting the dim forge light, did Eldrin slowly, carefully, withdraw the blade. It was black, matte, and deadly hard, but also terrifyingly brittle. A single tap from a hammer now would likely shatter it like glass. The hardening was complete, but the blade was a sleeping dragon, powerful but volatile. Now came tempering, the process of relieving the extreme internal stresses induced by hardening, trading a little absolute hardness for crucial toughness and flexibility. Eldrin carefully cleaned the scale from the blade with wire brushes and fine sand, revealing the clean steel beneath, now possessing a slightly mottled appearance from the quenching. He then banked the forge fire low, creating a gentle, even heat. Using a long rod, he suspended the blade horizontally above the coals, not in them, the radiant heat slowly warming the steel. He watched intently as the colors began to bloom along the blade, traveling like a slow sunrise from the tang towards the point. First came a faint, pale straw yellow, then a deeper gold, then a rich bronze, then peacock blue, then finally a deep, royal purple fading into gray near the still cooler point. Each color represented a different temperature and thus a different level of hardness, toughness. For this blade, needing resilience more than razor-edge hardness along its entire length, though the edges would be honed later. Eldrin aimed for a dominant, even bronze hue with hints of peacock blue, a balance point he judged perfect for channeling magic and enduring stress. When the color reached the bronze blue he desired, he quickly pulled the blade away, letting it cool slowly in the air. He repeated this tempering process twice more, each time heating slightly less to ensure the desired temper was set deep within the steel structure. Finally, the blade was ready, tough yet hard, resilient, a perfect physical vessel, but it was still silent steel. Now, as the blade cooled from its final temper, resting on a bed of clean, soft leather on his workbench, Eldrin picked up the writer's stone. The workshop was quieter now, the forge a low murmur. He placed the warm stone gently on the blade's cross-guard area and closed his eyes. This was the true beginning of the forge singing, the weaving of the stone's ancient song into the steel's very being, not with chants or gestures, but with profound stillness and deep listening. Eldrin focused his entire being, his breath slowing, his awareness sinking down, past the lingering heat of the forge, past the scent of oil and metal, down into the subtle vibrations within the blade, and then deeper, into the resonant core of the writer's stone. He listened, not with his ears, but with his spirit, to the slow, deep, powerful thrumming, the song of ice and enduring stone, of time and solitude, of sorrow and unyielding strength. He felt its cadence, its unique frequency, holding that resonance firmly in his mind, his spirit. He then reached out with his will, not imposing, but guiding, inviting. He began to hum, a low, wordless drone that resonated in his chest cavity, a sound that matched the fundamental note of the stone's song. He projected this resonance, this focused intent, towards the blade, imagining the steel not as inert matter, but as a receptive lattice, a blank musical staff waiting for notation. Slowly, patiently, he began to weave the stone's complex melody into that lattice. He visualized the vibrations flowing from the stone, through his own being acting as a conduit, and into the blade, following the path of the fuller, spiraling around the tang, settling into the crystalline structure of the steel, becoming an intrinsic part of it, not an addition, but an awakening of potential already forged in. The humming continued, a constant, low thrum that filled the silent workshop, merging with the faint residual heat hiss from the forge and the deep, slow pulse of the stone. Sometimes he would pause, sense a discord, adjust his internal resonance minutely, and continue. Sweat beaded on his temples, not from heat now, but from the intense mental and spiritual focus. Hours passed, the mountain night deepened outside, the single candle burned low, the blade, resting under the stone, seemed to absorb the faint light in the room, no longer merely black steel, but holding a depth, a quiet vibrancy, as if the moonlight outside was pooling within the fuller. A faint, harmonious hum, barely audible, began to emanate from the blade itself, a perfect counterpoint to Eldrin's drone and the stone's deep pulse, signifying the first true connection, the song beginning to live within the steel. The process was exhausting, a deep drain on Eldrin's aged spirit, but he persisted, note by subtle note, weaving the ancient lullaby for the raging spirit into the very heart of the sword. The monotonous, resonant humming, a profound and utterly soothing sound in the quiet, fire-lit workshop. Chapter 5, The Edge of Calm. Dawn was a pale suggestion behind the thick mountain mist when Eldrin finally ceased his humming, the silence that followed feeling vast and profound, broken only by the soft crackle of the banked forge and the distant cry of an eagle high above the peaks. He felt hollowed out, drained, yet filled with a quiet satisfaction. The rider's stone, still resting on the blade near the tang, pulsed with a slow, steady light that seemed less captive now, more content, resonating in perfect, silent harmony with the faint, almost subliminal hum emanating from the sword itself. The initial weaving was complete, the ancient song was embedded, sleeping within the steel, waiting for its moment, but a key needs an edge to fit the lock. The physical blade needed finishing. Eldrin carefully lifted the stone, its warmth a comforting weight in his palm, and set it back on its stand. He then picked up the blade, feeling its balance, excellent, the weight distributed perfectly along the fuller, the tang solid and reassuring. The real work of bringing out its lethal beauty and function began now. First, grinding and sharpening, Eldrin moved to a large, water-fed sandstone wheel turned by a foot treadle. Sitting on a worn stool, he pumped the treadle rhythmically, setting the heavy stone wheel spinning with a low, wet whir. Dipping the blade in a bucket of water, he carefully presented the edge to the spinning stone, starting near the hilt. A shower of dark gray slurry sprayed out as the abrasive stone met the hardened steel, the scree sound high-pitched and insistent. He worked with infinite patience, applying just enough pressure, constantly moving the blade, constantly dipping it in water to prevent overheating, which could ruin the temper he'd worked so hard to achieve. Inch by inch, he ground the rough hammer marks away, refining the bevels, establishing the primary edge geometry. The black, matte surface gave way to a smooth, satin gray. Hours passed at the wheel, the rhythmic pumping of the treadle and the steady scree becoming another layer of the workshop's somnolent symphony. When the rough grinding was done, he switched to progressively finer stones, first a medium grit, then a fine, then an even finer Arkansas stone, honing the edge, removing the scratches of the previous grit, the sound softening to a gentle shish shish shish. Finally, he used strips of supple leather glued to a flat paddle, charged with a green polishing compound made from crushed emerald dust and beeswax. Long, smooth strokes along the blade's length, first with the compound, then with clean leather, brought the steel to a soft, deep luster, not a mirror shine, but a subdued glow like moonlight on still water, the fuller appearing as a dark, mysterious river running down its center. The edges, honed to a terrifying, invisible sharpness, caught the light with a faint, cold gleam. Next, the hilt. Eldrin selected materials that complemented the blade's purpose and the stone's essence. For the grip core, he chose a dense, dark hardwood from an ancient, lightning-struck ironwood tree, wood that had endured the mountain storms for centuries. He carved and sanded it to a comfortable, slightly tapering octagonal shape that would sit securely in the hand. Over this, he wrapped a long grip in braided leather cord made from the hide of a high mountain goat, dyed a deep, frosty blue, providing both cushion and secure purchase even in cold or wet conditions. For the cross guard, he forged a simple, elegant piece from the same deep earth steel used in the blade, shaped like two opposing, gently curving waves meeting at the center, symbolizing the calming of turbulent forces. He meticulously filed and polished it to match the blade's finish. Finally, the pommel, the counterweight. He used a piece of the sky iron, forged into a slightly flattened sphere, its surface etched with a single, intricate rune of binding and resonance he'd learned from his own master's master. Assembling the hilt was a ritual in itself, fitting the tang through the cross guard, securing it with a tight-fitting, hidden wedge of the same ironwood, sliding the carved grip core onto the tang, perfectly snug, wrapping the leather cord with precise, overlapping turns, finally, pining the end of the tang over the sky iron pommel, hammering it carefully into a smooth, seamless dome that locked the entire assembly together as one solid piece. The finished sword was breathtaking in its understated power. The long, elegantly tapered blade with its deep fuller seemed to draw in the light. The dark ironwood and blue leather grip felt warm and alive in the hand. The wave-shaped crossguard and star pommel provided perfect balance, and within it, sleeping but present, was the deep, resonant song of the rider's stone, ready to be awakened. Eldrin held it aloft, feeling its perfect weight, its readiness. The low hum was constant now, a comforting vibration against his palm. The rider, gaunter than ever but eyes burning with renewed hope, arrived as the weak mountain sun finally burned through the mist, bathing the workshop in pale gold light. He said nothing, merely looked at the sword, then at Eldrin, then at the stone. Eldrin nodded, picking up the rider's stone. As the rider took the sword's hilt in both hands, his knuckles white, Eldrin placed the stone gently against the pommel. The moment the stone touched the sky iron, a visible pulse of soft, blue-white light traveled from the pommel, down the grip, along the cross guard, and flashed down the fuller of the blade to the point, illuminating the runes etched there for an instant. A deep, resonant chime, clear and pure as a mountain bell, filled the workshop, vibrating in their bones. The sword's latent hum deepened, harmonizing perfectly with the stone's pulse. The connection was complete. The key was forged. The rider exhaled a shuddering breath, a tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. He sheathed the sword in a simple, oiled leather scabbard Eldrin had prepared, slung it across his back with reverence, took the rider's stone, now glowing with a steady, calm light, and with a final, wordless bow of profound gratitude to the old smith, turned and walked out into the cold mountain morning, heading back towards the high, troubled peaks. Eldrin watched him go until he disappeared into the mist-shrouded pines. The workshop felt suddenly vast and quiet, the absence of the sword's hum and the stone's pulse leaving a palpable silence. The forge fire had burned low. Weariness, deep and bone-aching, settled over him like a heavy cloak. He banked the fire carefully, the familiar motion soothing, the rhythmic scraping of the shovel, the soft hiss of fresh coal settling, the dwindling crackle. He sat heavily on his worn stool by the cooling forge, the residual warmth welcome against the creeping mountain chill seeping under the door. The hypnotic daze of intense focus, the endless rhythm of hammer and stone, the deep drone of the forge singing, the profound silence after the sword's departure, it all coalesced into a heavy, warm blanket of exhaustion. His eyes grew heavy, watching the last embers glow like captured sunset deep within the ash. The scent of hot metal, oiled leather, wood smoke, and the lingering ozone of magic filled his nostrils, familiar and comforting. The immense quiet of the mountains, only broken by the drip of melting frost from the eaves outside, settled around the stone cottage. Eldrin Thorne, the ancient sword maker, leaned his head back against the warm stones of the forge, his hands resting loosely on his knees, the gnarled fingers still. In the deep, warm silence punctuated only by the soft sigh of dying embers and the distant wind in the pines, the old man's breathing deepened, slowed, and he slipped into a profound, well-earned sleep. The story of the key blade complete for now, the workshop holding its breath around him. Chapter 6. The silence after the song. The profound quiet left in the wake of the rider's departure and the resonant chime of the awakened sword settled over Eldrin's workshop like a thick layer of mountain snow, muffling the usual small sounds, the creak of cooling metal, the drip of condensation from the rafters, the skitter of a mouse in the far corner. The forge, banked low, glowed with a sullen red eye, radiating a diminishing circle of warmth that barely reached the anvil. Eldrin remained slumped on his stool, the deep weariness of intense spiritual exertion and days of unrelenting physical labor pressing down on his ancient bones like the weight of the mountains themselves. Sleep had taken him swiftly, a dark, dreamless well into which he plunged, and he awoke hours later, stiff and cold, the gray light of late afternoon filtering through the small window, painting long shadows across the dusty floor. His muscles protested as he pushed himself upright, joints popping like dry twigs. The workshop felt different, emptier, quieter, the lingering resonance of the completed sword and the rider's stone entirely absent, leaving behind only the familiar, mundane hum of well-used stone and dormant tools. The tools themselves seemed almost expectant, hanging on their pegs, resting on benches, waiting for the next task. Eldrin moved slowly, stiffly, feeding a few lumps of charcoal into the forge, coaxing a small, warm flame back to life, not for work, but for comfort, for the simple, primal reassurance of its heat and light. He filled his battered kettle from the icy mountain stream that ran past his cottage and hung it over the low fire, the promise of strong, bitter tea a small anchor to routine. While the water heated, he began the slow process of tidying, sweeping the accumulated scale and charcoal dust into a pile near the forge door, meticulously wiping down his anvil with an oiled rag, returning hammers and tongs to their designated places, the familiar, methodical actions helping to ground him, to ease the strange sense of absence. The space where the sword had rested on the leather pad was starkly empty. He picked up the pad, brushing off invisible particles, folding it carefully before placing it back in its chest. The act of cleaning was its own meditation, a return to the bedrock of his existence. Order, care, the tending of tools and space. The kettle began its thin, rising whistle, pulling him back. He brewed the tea strong and dark in his heavy clay mug, the steam warming his face as he cupped it in his gnarled hands. Inhaling the earthy aroma, he sat again on his stool, facing the small, dancing flames, sipping the scalding liquid, feeling its heat spread through his core. The immense effort of the past days began to settle within him, not just as fatigue, but as a deep, quiet satisfaction. He had met the challenge, bent ancient forces to a purpose of peace, poured his skill and spirit into metal and magic. The rider's desperate hope was now carried high into the peaks, bound within steel and stone. Eldrin could only trust the work, trust the song he had woven. Outside, the short mountain day was fading fast, the shadows deepening into indigo, the first stars pricking through the clear, cold sky. The silence within the workshop was no longer empty, but filled with the soft crackle of the fire, the hiss of steam from his mug, the slow, steady rhythm of his own breathing, a peaceful counterpoint to the recent symphony of creation. He finished his tea, the warmth lingering, the prospect of simple food, perhaps a thick stew reheated from yesterday, and then his narrow cot in the small room adjoining the workshop beckoned. The monumental task was done, the workshop was clean, the fire was tended. For now, there was only the quiet, the warmth, the deep, bone-soothing stillness after the storm of making, a stillness as profound and comforting as sleep itself, wrapping around him like the familiar scent of wood smoke and hot iron. Chapter 7, The Dust and the New Ore. Days slipped past Stone Creek like water over smooth stones, marked by the slow arc of the sun across the narrow strip of sky visible between the peaks, the deepening frost etching thicker lacework on Eldrin's window each morning, and the gradual settling back into the rhythm of small, necessary tasks. The forge saw action again, but of a mundane, comforting sort. Repairing the broken hinge on Farmer Boren's plowshare, retempering the head of woodsman Kell's splitting axe after it chipped on a knot of frozen ironwood, crafting a set of sturdy, unadorned fire pokers for the village inn. The work was straightforward, requiring skill but not the soul-deep focus of the spirit-calming blade. The rhythmic clang-clang of hammer on steel was a familiar heartbeat in the workshop, the heat a welcome defiance against the encroaching winter cold. Eldrin found solace in these simple commissions, the tangible proof of his craft's utility in the daily life of the village. He restocked his charcoal supply, bartering a finely honed skinning knife for 3 large sacks of dense, slow-burning oak charcoal from the collier who lived down valley. He sorted through his stores of common iron and steel, taking inventory, oiling metal surfaces against the damp mountain air. The workshop slowly returned to its usual state of ordered clutter. The lingering psychic space once occupied by the rider's stone and the resonant sword gradually filled with the comforting solidity of the everyday. Yet, a subtle shift had occurred. Eldrin found himself listening more intently, not just to the metal under his hammer, but to the silence between strikes, to the whisper of the wind around the eaves, to the deep quiet of the mountains themselves. He wondered, sometimes gazing towards the towering, snow-clad ice-claw peaks barely visible through the mist, if the song had found its mark, if the raging spirit had been soothed. No news came from the high valleys, which he took as a tentative good sign. No further tales of unnatural blizzards or tremors reached Stone Creek. The rider's stone's profound silence now felt like a distant, resolved chord rather than an absence. Then, one crisp morning when frost lay thick and white on the ground, crunching underfoot, a different kind of visitor arrived. Not a desperate rider, but Mistress Althea, the village herb wife and keeper of old lore, her breath pluming in the cold air as she pushed open the workshop door, her basket laden with pungent dried herbs and a wrapped bundle. Her sharp, kind eyes took in the workshop before settling on Eldrin, cold enough to freeze the forge's heart. "Eldrin," she greeted, her voice like dry leaves rustling, "brought you some warming time and a bit of that bone-knit salve for the winter aches." And she placed the wrapped bundle carefully on his least cluttered workbench, "something I found tucked away in the back of my storage cave, behind the mandrake roots and the jar of powdered wyvern scale. Belonged to my great-grandmother. She said it was useless to her but might sing to a forge singer's ears." Eldrin unwrapped the coarse linen to reveal a chunk of ore unlike any he'd seen before. It was roughly the size of his fist, incredibly dense, its surface a swirling, iridescent black shot through with veins of deep, luminous purple and flecks of silver that caught the light like trapped stars. It felt strangely cool to the touch, not cold like ice, but holding an inner stillness, a profound absence of vibration. He picked it up, his experienced fingers tracing its contours. It was heavier than lead, yet there was a peculiar inertness to it, as if it existed slightly apart from the world. "Void iron," Althea said softly, watching his face. "Or so the tale goes. Fell from a starless patch of sky, generations back. My great-grandmother tried to smelt it once, for a protective amulet," she said. Said the fire wouldn't touch it, not truly. Just sat there, glowing dull red but refusing to melt, refusing to sing. She gave up. Eldrin hefted the dense lump. The description matched the oldest, most obscure texts he'd studied in his youth. Void iron, metal born of the spaces between stars, resistant to heat and magic, a conductor of stillness, of negation, incredibly rare, almost mythical. Crafting with it was said to be near impossible, requiring techniques lost to time. But the potential, a shield that could nullify hostile enchantments, armor that turned aside not just blades but curses, a vessel for profound silence. The challenge, dormant since the writer's departure, stirred within him again, a slow, deep ember of curiosity glowing beneath the surface of his daily routine. He thanked Althea gravely, offering her a finely balanced herb chopping knife in return. After she left, the workshop felt charged, different. The void iron sat on his bench, a dark, silent enigma, its swirling depths seeming to absorb the light and sound around it. The comfortable rhythm of small tasks resumed, sharpening a scythe, mending a cookpot, but Eldrin's gaze kept drifting back to the strange ore, his mind already turning over the ancient, fragmented lore, the whispered techniques for awakening slumbering metals, the immense challenge of coaxing song from perfect silence. The forge's familiar warmth held a new anticipation, the quiet hum of the workshop now holding a space for a different kind of potential, deep, still, and waiting. Chapter 8, The Forge of Silence. The void iron sat on Eldrin's workbench for days, a dense, silent presence that seemed to deepen the shadows around it. He didn't rush. Rushing was for fools and apprentices. Instead, he prepared, meticulously and deliberately, the comfortable rhythm of village commissions providing a grounding counterpoint to the immense, unknown challenge the ore represented. He reread his oldest, most fragile scrolls, parchments brittle with age, filled with cramped script and diagrams faded almost to obscurity, texts passed down through generations of thorns, detailing materials and methods considered more legend than craft. He found references to void iron, or star void metal, described as the embodiment of the abyss, resistant to the flame's kiss, requiring not heat, but the breath of the void made manifest, or the cold heart of a fallen star's core. Cryptic, frustrating, yet Eldrin parsed the metaphors with the intuition of a lifetime steeped in the language of metal and magic. Traditional fire was useless, that much was clear from Althea's tale. He needed a different kind of forge. Deep within the workshop, behind a heavy tapestry depicting a stylized mountain crowned with stars, lay a small, secondary hearth, rarely used. It wasn't a forge for fire, but for cold, built from blocks of deep black basalt veined with silver. Its center held not a fire pit, but a shallow, polished depression carved from a single piece of midnight blue obsidian, cold to the touch even in summer. Eldrin cleaned this ancient cold forge meticulously, removing decades of dust with soft brushes, polishing the obsidian basin until it shone like dark water. The texts hinted at reagents, powdered moonstone which he had used in the quenching bath before, stardust, a poetic name for specific, incredibly rare meteoritic minerals he fortunately possessed tiny amounts of, and the tears of the mountain, meltwater from the heart of a glacier, collected at the dark of the moon. He gathered these components, handling them with reverence, The preparation itself was a ritual. Under the weak light of a waning crescent moon seen through the high window, Eldrin ground the moonstone and stardust together in a mortar carved from glacier ice kept frozen by enchantments, creating a shimmering, silvery gray powder that seemed to drink the moonlight. He mixed this powder with the glacial meltwater in a bowl of pure silver, stirring slowly with an ironwood rod. The mixture emitting a faint, high-pitched hum and a scent like ozone and frost, the air in the workshop grew noticeably colder. Finally, he placed the chunk of void iron into the center of the obsidian basin. It looked like a piece of the night sky fallen to earth. Taking a deep breath, Eldrin poured the silvery mixture slowly over the ore. Instead of wetting it or running off, the liquid mixture seemed to coalesce around the void iron, clinging to its surface, forming a shimmering, mercurial skin that pulsed with a faint, cold light. The temperature in the small alcove plummeted. Frost began to bloom across the basalt walls and the tools hanging nearby. Eldrin felt the intense cold bite through his thick tunic, but he focused. This was not fire, but its inverse, focused, amplified, profound cold, channeled and directed by the reagents. He placed his hands, palm down, just above the coated ore, not touching it, but focusing his will, his spirit, not on generating heat, but on intensifying the stillness, the absence, the deep cold inherent in the void iron and amplified by the mixture. He didn't hum. He breathed out slowly, steadily, visualizing his breath not as warm vapor, but as pure, crystalline cold, flowing down onto the ore, sinking into it. The shimmering coating began to glow brighter, a cold, blue-white radiance that cast sharp, stark shadows. The void iron itself started to change. The swirling blackness seemed to deepen, becoming impossibly dark, while the veins of purple and silver within began to shimmer with an inner light, not warm, but intensely bright and cold, like distant, frozen stars. A deep, resonant thrum began to emanate from the ore, not a sound heard with ears, but a vibration felt in the bones, in the teeth, a profound bass note of pure cold and stillness that made the very air feel thick and sluggish. Eldrin maintained his focus, pouring his intent into the cold forge, guiding the frigid energy, not to melt the metal in the conventional sense, but to soften its absolute resistance, to make its profound stillness malleable, receptive. Sweat beaded on his brow despite the intense cold, freezing instantly into tiny crystals. The process was agonizingly slow, demanding immense concentration to sustain the unnatural cold and the focused will. Hours crawled by, measured only by the slow creep of moonlight across the floor and the deepening intensity of the cold glow. Finally, just as Eldrin felt his endurance waning, the resonant thrum shifted subtly. The void iron surface, beneath the shimmering coating, seemed to lose its absolute solidity, becoming slightly, yielding, like the hardest ice under immense pressure, not melting, but becoming capable of flow. It was ready, not for hammering as he knew it, but for the next, even more delicate phase, shaping the unyielding silence. Eldrin carefully, using tongs forged from the same deep earth steel that formed the spine of the rider's sword, lifted the impossibly cold, glowing ore from the basin. The air crackled around it. He placed it onto a small anvil he'd prepared, carved from a single block of black diamond, the hardest natural substance, chilled to match the void iron's temperature. Holding another, smaller, diamond-tipped hammer, its handle wrapped in thick, insulating leather, he raised it. This would not be a hammering of force, but of resonance, of precise, controlled impacts designed not to deform, but to guide the yielding stillness. He brought the diamond hammer down in a single, perfect, resonant tink. The sound was impossibly clear and sharp, like ice shattering in absolute silence, and a visible ripple of dark light spread from the point of impact across the surface of the void iron, a wave of contained potential. The shaping of silence had begun, each precise, cold tink a note in a frigid, profound lullaby of negation. Chapter 9, The Shaping of Stillness. The cold anvil chamber remained a pocket of deep winter within the workshop, frost permanently etching intricate, feathery patterns on the basalt walls and hanging tools. Eldrin worked in layers of thick furs, his breath pluming thickly in the frigid air, the diamond hammer feeling like a shard of ice itself in his gloved hand. Shaping the void iron was unlike any forging he'd ever known. There was no heat, no glowing metal, no shower of sparks, only the intense, bone-deep cold, the eerie blue-white glow emanating from the reagent-coated ore, and the sharp, crystalline tink of diamond striking void metal. Each impact was a carefully calculated event. He didn't beat the metal into submission. He coaxed it, guided it, his hammer blows landing with pinpoint accuracy, each tink sending a precise ripple of dark energy through the yielding mass, persuading the profound stillness to flow, minutely, into a new shape. It was agonizingly slow progress. A dozen precise taps might achieve what a single heavy blow would on hot steel. He was shaping not just form, but the very texture of the silence within the metal, aligning its internal negation, layer by subatomic layer, between sessions of hammering, which could last only minutes before the intense cold and mental focus forced him to retreat to the warmth of the main forge to thaw and rest. He would return the void iron to the obsidian basin, reapplying the shimmering cold reagent mixture to maintain its malleable state. Gradually, painstakingly, the rough chunk began to transform. Eldrin envisioned a shield boss, a central disc that could anchor a larger defense, its purpose to be a focal point of negation. He worked the yielding void iron, the diamond hammer singing its sharp, cold song, tink 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 scrape using a diamond-tipped burnisher to smooth minute imperfections, tink tink. The disc took shape, perfectly circular, impossibly smooth, its surface a depthless black that seemed to swallow the faint light in the chamber, the veins of purple and silver now swirling in complex, concentric patterns beneath the surface like frozen nebulae. The profound silence it radiated was palpable, a sphere of utter quiet extending a handspan from its surface where even the vibrations of sound seemed to die. Once the basic disc was formed, the true artistry began. The inlay, Eldrin prepared thin wires of sun-touched copper and slivers of sky iron, materials chosen for their inherent resonance, their ability to conduct energy, using tools finer than a watchmaker's, crafted from enchanted ice and reinforced spider silk. He painstakingly cut minute channels into the surface of the void iron disc, following the swirling patterns of the internal nebulae. The void iron resisted even this, its stillness rejecting the intrusion, requiring constant reapplication of the cold reagent and the focused pressure of his diamond tools. Into these hair-thin channels, he laid the wires and slivers. The sun copper, warm and vibrant, seemed to fight the void iron's cold negation, buzzing faintly until Eldrin used a tiny diamond anvil and hammer to tap it just so, harmonizing its resonance with the disk's profound stillness, turning its inherent energy into a contained circuit rather than a conflict. The sky iron slivers, light and ethereal, required a different touch, aligning their celestial hum with the deep bass note of the void. It was micro-forging, a symphony of near-silent taps and adjustments conducted in the freezing gloom, each tiny component persuaded to coexist within the field of negation, not to disrupt it, but to pattern it, to give the stillness a specific focus, a direction. Eldrin worked for hours under the glow of a single cold light crystal, his world reduced to the minuscule landscape under his magnifying lenses, the sharp tink of his micro-hammer, the feel of the diamond tools in his numb fingers, the profound, sleep-inducing silence pressing in around him. The swirling patterns on the disc began to incorporate the inlaid metals, the sun copper glowing with a contained, deep gold light where it lay, the sky iron shimmering with captured starlight, all held within the depthless black field, creating a complex, luminous map of contained power against the canvas of absolute silence. The shield boss was nearing completion, a masterpiece of frozen potential and intricate, resonant stillness, its surface a hypnotic dance of dark and light, cold and contained energy, radiating a profound, quieting aura that seeped out into the main workshop, making the very flames of the forge burn lower, quieter, as if respectful of the deep cold taking shape in the adjacent chamber. Chapter 10, The Binding Chill. The shield boss, a disk of contained night sky and patterned silence, lay finished upon the black diamond anvil, its inlaid sun copper and sky iron tracery glowing with a soft, internal luminescence against the depthless void iron, the air around it thick and still, muffling even the distant sound of the wind outside. Eldrin, exhausted but deeply satisfied, carefully lifted it with deep earth steel tongs whose tips were already rimmed with frost. The final step remained, binding the profound negation and patterned resonance into a permanent state, sealing the delicate micro-forging and the immense cold forging into a cohesive, enduring whole. Traditional quenching was impossible. Plunging this artifact of absolute cold into liquid would likely cause catastrophic shattering or an uncontrolled release of its contained energies. The text spoke of the embracing dark, a process of sealing within a field of amplified stillness. Eldrin prepared another mixture, similar to the cold reagent but subtly different. Powdered obsidian for grounding, glacial ice melt infused with starlight water left under the clear night sky for a full lunar cycle, and a single drop of his own blood, willingly given, to act as a binding agent and a focus for his will. He mixed these in the silver bowl, the concoction swirling black and silver, emitting no scent but radiating an intense, dry cold. Carefully, using a brush made from the white winter fur of a mountain hare, he painted this mixture over the entire surface of the shield boss, covering the intricate inlay and the void iron equally. Where the mixture touched the metal, it didn't wet it, but seemed to sink into it, vanishing without a trace, leaving the surface pristine but causing the disc to pulse once with a deep, indigo light. The temperature in the cold forge chamber plummeted even further. Eldrin's breath crystallized instantly in the air. Frost raced across every surface, thickening rapidly. He placed the disc back onto the black diamond anvil, now coated in a thick layer of rime. Standing before it, he didn't raise his hammer. Instead, he closed his eyes, centering himself. He reached out with his spirit, not towards the disc's surface patterns, but towards the profound, resonant silence at its core, the deep bass note of negation he had awakened and shaped. He matched his own internal resonance to that deep stillness, becoming a conduit for it. Then, with a slow, deliberate exhalation, visualized not heat, but an intensification of cold, a focusing of the void's embrace. He projected this focused intent, this amplified stillness, into the disc. The air crackled with unseen energy. The shield boss began to vibrate silently. A tremor felt in the floor, not heard. The inlaid sun copper and sky iron tracery flared brightly, gold and silver starlight, then dimmed, their light seeming to be drawn inward, compressed, contained within the swirling patterns. The depthless black of the void iron deepened further, becoming less a color and more an absence, a hole in perception. A final, silent pulse of indigo light washed over the disc, so intense it cast sharp shadows even through Eldrin's closed eyelids. And then, stillness, utter, profound, absolute stillness. The vibration ceased. The light from the inlay settled into a steady, contained gleam, like distant stars seen through perfect black ice. The crushing cold began to recede, slowly, leaving behind a deep, resonant chill that emanated from the disc itself, not as an aggressive force, but as a sphere of perfect, focused quiet. Eldrin opened his eyes. The shield boss looked unchanged, yet fundamentally different. It felt complete, whole, its immense power now seamlessly integrated, bound, and dormant, radiating an aura of deep, soothing silence that pushed back the usual workshop clamor, creating a bubble of tranquility. The frost on the walls stopped spreading, then began to sublime slowly into the air. Eldrin, trembling slightly with exertion and cold, carefully lifted the disc. It felt heavier than before, dense with contained potential, yet perfectly balanced. The cold it radiated was no longer biting, but clean, refreshing, like the heart of a glacier. The intricate patterns seemed to shift subtly when viewed from different angles, the contained starlight within the inlay pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm. He carried it out of the frigid chamber into the main workshop. The difference was immediate. The crackle of the forge fire softened, becoming a distant murmur. The usual metallic tang in the air seemed muted. A profound sense of calm settled over the space. Eldrin placed the void iron shield boss carefully on a bed of dark blue velvet on his main workbench. It sat there, a nexus of contained night and patterned silence, a masterpiece of cold forging and resonant stillness. The immense effort of its creation settled upon him like a physical weight, the deep quiet it radiated seeping into his bones. He stoked the forge fire slightly, more for light than heat, and sat on his worn stool, gazing at the artifact. The rhythmic, subdued crackle of the flames, the deep, resonant silence emanating from the disc, the lingering scent of frost and ozone, it all wove together into a tapestry of profound peace. His eyelids grew heavy, the hypnotic pulse of the contained starlight within the boss drawing him down. The immense quiet wasn't empty, but full, a deep well of stillness he could rest in. The last thing he saw before sleep claimed him was the swirling nebula pattern on the void iron, holding stars and silence, a perfect lullaby rendered in metal and cold light. Chapter 11, The Whisper in the Wood. The profound, resonant silence emanating from the completed void iron shield boss settled over Eldrin's workshop like a physical blanket, muting the crackle of the banked forge to a soft sigh and turning the usual clatter of tools into distant, muffled sounds. The deep chill it radiated was no longer fierce, but pervasive, a constant, clean coolness that made the warmth near the hearth feel more intimate, more earned. Eldrin moved through this new, quieter atmosphere with a sense of profound weariness intertwined with deep satisfaction, the bone-deep fatigue from shaping the unyielding void iron lingering for days, demanding rest and simple tasks. He oiled tools, meticulously sorted bins of scrap metal, sharpened blades for the villagers with slow, deliberate strokes on the whetstone, the rhythmic shhhk a soothing counterpoint to the shield boss's silent hum. The artifact itself remained on its velvet bed, a focal point of stillness, its swirling nebulae patterns seeming to shift minutely when observed from the corner of the eye. The contained starlight within the inlay pulsing with the slow, steady rhythm of a resting heart. Eldrin found himself often pausing in his work, drawn to simply gaze at it, not just admiring the craftsmanship, but basking in the deep quiet it emanated, a quiet that seeped into his own spirit, smoothing the ragged edges left by the immense effort of its creation. The mountain winter tightened its grip outside, snow falling thick and silent, piling high against the stone walls of the cottage, muffling the world further. The workshop became a warm, quiet cave, lit by the forge's glow and the soft, contained light of the void iron disk. Eldrin spent long evenings by the fire, sipping bitter tea, his mind pleasantly empty, lulled by the profound stillness. Then, one afternoon when the snow fell in thick, soft flakes, blanketing the world in white silence, a hesitant knock sounded at the heavy oak door, barely audible over the shield boss's quieting field. Eldrin opened it to find young Lira, the woodcarver's daughter, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her eyes wide and anxious, clutching a bundle wrapped in oiled canvas against her thick woolen coat. "Master Thorne," she stammered, her breath pluming. Father sent me. "It's the heartwood lute. It won't sing right. Not since the first big snow. It sounds thin, sad, wrong." She unwrapped the bundle carefully, revealing not a weapon, but an instrument of breathtaking beauty. The lute's body was carved from a single piece of ancient, polished singing oak heartwood, its grain swirling in mesmerizing patterns of deep amber and gold, the soundboard inlaid with intricate mother-of-pearl depicting stylized birds in flight. The neck was smooth, dark ironwood, fitted with silver frets, and the tuning pegs were carved from moon-bleached bone. Even cradled in Lira's arms, it looked vibrant, alive, yet Eldrin could feel it immediately, a discordant vibration, a faint disharmony emanating from the wood itself, a subtle wrongness beneath its beauty, like a healthy tree with a hidden rot. Lira placed it gently on his workbench, her fingers lingering on the smooth wood. "Grandmother made it," she whispered, her voice thick. "It's always sung true, for generations. Helped the crops grow, calmed the storms, till now. Please, Master Thorne, can you hear what's wrong?" Eldrin nodded gravely, his calloused fingers hovering over the instrument, not touching it yet. He closed his eyes, extending his awareness, listening not just with his ears, but with the sensitivity honed by decades of feeling the song within metal and stone. The discord was clear to his spirit, a faint, jarring dissonance, a broken string in the lute's inherent resonance, not a physical crack, but a spiritual fracture, a weariness in the ancient heartwood itself, perhaps strained by the unnatural deep freeze or some unseen malaise. It needed not repair, but reawakening, a retuning of its deep, natural song. This was a different kind of making, a healing of wood and spirit, a challenge that stirred a new kind of focus within him, a gentler counterpart to the forging of steel and silence. The void iron's profound quiet seemed to deepen around the lute, as if offering a still pool for its troubled song to resonate within. Chapter 12. The Resonance of Roots. The singing oak heartwood lute lay upon Eldrin's workbench, a thing of organic beauty radiating a subtle, troubled vibration that seemed to pulse against the profound stillness of the nearby void iron shield boss. Eldrin didn't reach for chisels or glue. This required a different approach, a deeper listening. He dimmed the forge light, leaving only the soft, contained starlight from the shield boss and a single candle burning clear, unscented beeswax. The workshop plunged into a deeper gloom, the air thick with the scent of wood, wax, cold stone, and the lute's faint, discordant hum. Eldrin sat on a low stool, closing his eyes, breathing slowly and deeply, centering himself in the quiet amplified by the void iron. He reached out, not with his hands, but with his spirit, towards the lute. He felt the ancient song of the singing oak, deep and resonant, the song of sunlight and deep roots, of seasons turning and sap rising, but woven through it, like a thorny vine, was the discord, a thread of brittleness, a note of exhaustion, a fracture in the wood's connection to its own living essence. It felt drained, as if the deep cold had leached its vitality, or perhaps some unseen sorrow had touched it. Eldrin focused on the fundamental note of the heartwood's true song, the deep, warm thrum of life and growth. He began to hum, low and soft, matching that resonance, projecting it gently towards the lute, not forcing, but inviting, reminding the wood of its own inherent power, its connection to the earth, to the sun, to the rain. He visualized golden light, warm and nurturing, flowing from his own spirit, seeping into the polished wood, following the swirling grain patterns, seeking the source of the fracture. The discordant vibration fluttered, resisted briefly, then began to soften, yielding to the gentle, insistent pressure of the true song. He shifted his humming, introducing subtle harmonics, notes of resilience from the ironwood neck, notes of clarity from the mother-of-pearl inlay, notes of enduring memory from the bone-tuning pegs, weaving them into the fundamental resonance of the heartwood, creating a complex, healing harmony. The lute began to respond. A faint, warm glow seemed to emanate from within the wood, pulsing in time with his humming. The discordant note weakened, frayed, and finally dissolved, replaced by a tentative, pure tone that resonated through the bench and up Eldrin's spine. The fracture wasn't mended by force, but soothed, coaxed back into wholeness by the reminder of its own strength and the supportive harmony of its parts. Eldrin maintained the hum, the healing resonance, for a long time, reinforcing the newly restored connection, strengthening the lute's inherent song. The void iron's profound silence acted as a perfect sounding board, allowing the pure resonance to build and clarify without external interference. Slowly, the warm glow within the heartwood steadied, becoming a soft, constant radiance. The tentative tone deepened, grew richer, filling the quiet workshop with a sound like sunlight filtering through ancient leaves, a deep, vibrant hum of restored vitality. Eldrin finally let his humming fade, the lute's own resonant song now strong and clear, harmonious and whole, vibrating gently against his fingertips. When he finally, reverently, touched the smooth wood, the discord was gone, replaced by a profound sense of peace and restored potential. The heartwood lute was healed, not by craft alone, but by a resonance of spirit and memory, its song once again true and strong, ready to sing for the village. The deep, warm hum a comforting counterpoint to the shield boss's silent chill. Chapter 15, The Keeper's Hearth. The spirit-calming sword found a new place of honor in Eldrin's workshop, resting horizontally on sturdy iron brackets mounted on the stone wall opposite the forge, its scabbard plain but well-oiled, the hilt and pommel gleaming softly in the firelight. The rider's stone sat on a small, polished stand of dark obsidian next to the void iron shield boss on the main workbench, its steady pulse a warm, golden counterpoint to the shield boss's deep, silent chill and the contained starlight within its inlay. The three artifacts, the sword humming its low, constant song of peace, the stone pulsing with ancient, calming power, and the shield boss radiating profound, focused stillness, existed in a state of harmonious resonance, their combined energies creating an atmosphere in the workshop that was uniquely tranquil, deeply quiet yet vibrantly alive with contained power. The usual sounds, the crackle of the fire, the scrape of a tool, the sigh of the bellows, were softened, deepened, woven into the subtle symphony of the artifacts. Eldrin moved through this space with a profound sense of guardianship, no longer just a maker, but a keeper. He tended the forge, not just for warmth or work, but as a familiar anchor, its rhythmic pulse a grounding element. He performed the small rituals of maintenance, oiling the sword's scabbard, dusting the shield boss with a soft, static-free cloth, occasionally resting his hand on the rider's stone, feeling its warm, steady heartbeat, a reassurance of peace achieved. Villagers still came, but more hesitantly, speaking in hushed tones, drawn by the workshop's unique aura as much as by Eldrin's skill. He mended a pot, forged a new hinge for the miller's door, sharpened scythes for the coming thaw, each task performed with deliberate care within the encompassing quiet. The deep winter began to loosen its grip, the snowfalls lessened, the days grew imperceptibly longer, though the cold remained sharp. Eldrin found himself spending more time simply being present in the workshop, sitting on his worn stool, sipping tea, watching the interplay of firelight on the artifacts, the way the flames reflected on the sword's pommel, how the rider's stone's glow illuminated the swirling nebulae on the shield boss, the deep silence holding the soft sounds, the rhythmic, layered resonance, the sword's hum, the stone's pulse, the forge's crackle, the profound stillness, wove a tapestry of sound and silence that was profoundly restful, a natural sedative for the mind. Weariness, not from exertion but from the long winter and the weight of years, settled comfortably upon him. The warmth of the forge, the deep quiet of the artifacts, the familiar scent of wood smoke, oiled leather, and cold stone, all conspired to draw him towards rest. One evening, as the last embers of the forge glowed like captured sunsets and the rider's stone pulsed its steady, golden rhythm against the void iron's silent field, Eldrin sat, his tea cooling beside him, his gaze moving slowly from the spirit-calming sword to the stone to the shield boss. The harmony they created was a physical presence, a deep, resonant blanket settling over the stone cottage. His breathing slowed, deepened, the hypnotic pulse of light and silence, the gentle warmth, the weight of peaceful guardianship, all merged into an irresistible invitation. His eyelids grew heavy, the swirling patterns on the shield boss blurring into a galaxy of contained starlight. The last conscious sensation was the sword's low, constant hum vibrating softly through the stone wall against his back, a lullaby woven of peace, stillness, and ancient song. As he leaned back, his hands resting loosely in his lap, and surrendered to the deep, quiet sleep of the keeper, the workshop holding its breath and its power in perfect, resonant harmony around him. Chapter 16, The Thaw's Murmur. The deep quiet held, a tangible presence woven from the spirit-calming sword's constant low hum resonating through the stone wall, the rider's stone's warm, golden pulse beating like a slow, steady heart on the obsidian stand, and the void iron shield boss's profound, silent chill radiating outwards, creating a sphere of utter stillness that seemed to deepen the shadows and soften the edges of sound within the workshop. Winter's grip outside, however, was finally yielding. The relentless freeze broke, replaced by a tentative, damp cold that carried the promise of change. The heavy snow blanketing Stone Creek and the Greyfang slopes began its slow retreat, shrinking back from the cottage walls, revealing dark, wet earth and the skeletal remains of frost-killed ferns. The most profound shift was auditory. The absolute silence of deep snow gave way to the constant, rhythmic drip of meltwater from the eaves, a sound that, while gentle, felt startlingly loud against the artifact-enhanced quiet within Eldrin's sanctuary. This new sound, persistent and organic, subtly altered the workshop's atmosphere. It wasn't an intrusion, but a counterpoint, a reminder of the world turning outside the stone walls and the carefully maintained resonance within. Eldrin noticed it first as he sat by the low-burning forge one gray morning, sipping his bitter tea. The familiar hum of the sword, the pulse of the stone, the crackle of the fire, all were there, but beneath them, woven through the shield boss's silence, was this insistent, liquid percussion. It created a strange, layered soundscape, the deep, artificial quiet holding the soft, natural sounds of the thaw at a respectful distance, yet unable to completely mute them. He found himself listening to it, the rhythmic drip, marking time in a way the steady artifacts did not. It spoke of transformation, of hidden streams beginning to flow beneath the snow, of roots stirring in the frozen ground. The quality of light changed too. The weak winter sun, when it pierced the lingering mountain mist, held a fraction more warmth, casting longer, softer shadows that stretched across the workshop floor, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air near the forge. The rider's stone seemed to glow a touch brighter in response, its golden pulse warming the immediate space around it on the bench, while the void iron's contained starlight appeared sharper, clearer, as if refracted through melting ice. Eldrin's routine adapted. He opened the heavy workshop door for short periods during the brightest part of the day, letting the cold, damp air, smelling sharply of wet pine and thawing earth, mingle with the familiar sense of hot metal, oil, and stone. The influx of outside air stirred the workshop's stillness, carrying with it the distant rush of Stone Creek, swollen with meltwater, a sound that had been absent for months, buried under ice and snow. It was a roar compared to the internal quiet, yet the artifacts seemed to absorb it, dampening its intensity within their sphere of influence, turning it into a deep, muffled rumble that vibrated the floor stones faintly. villagers began to venture out more. The path to Eldrin's door, churned into thick mud by boots and hooves, saw more traffic. They came not just for repairs now, but bearing the first signs of the coming season, requests for sturdy hinges for lambing pens, sharpening of pruning hooks for the dormant orchards below, reinforcing the handles of spades soon to bite into softening earth. Their voices, too, seemed louder, infused with a cautious optimism that felt almost jarring against the workshop's deep serenity. Eldrin worked steadily, forging a new latch for the miller's grain store, its simple, functional form a world away from the artifacts sharing his space. The rhythmic clang of his hammer on the hot steel felt different now, sharper, perhaps, against the backdrop of dripping water and the muffled roar of the creek, yet still harmonizing with the sword's hum and the stone's pulse. He found the shield boss's profound silence particularly comforting during these noisier days, a well of stillness he could mentally retreat into when the sounds of the thaw and renewed village life threatened to overwhelm his accustomed peace. One afternoon, as he polished the newly forged latch to a smooth, dull sheen, the dripping from the eaves seemed to intensify, forming a faster rhythm, drip 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 drip, almost like impatient fingers tapping. A shaft of watery sunlight fell directly on the rider's stone, making its golden pulse flare momentarily, casting warm reflections that danced across the swirling nebulae of the void iron disk. In that moment, Eldrin felt it, a subtle shift in the resonance. The sword's hum deepened fractionally, the shield boss's chill seemed to focus, pulling the dripping sounds into its field, softening their sharpness, turning the rapid drip drip into a softer, more resonant plink, 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 that echoed faintly within the obsidian basin. It was as if the artifacts were listening, adapting, weaving the sounds of the changing season into their own complex, quiet symphony. The warmth near the forge, the damp chill from the open door, the deep hum, the steady pulse, the profound silence, the rhythmic drip of meltwater transformed into soft chimes, the distant rumble of the creek, it all coalesced, not into chaos, but into a rich, layered tapestry of sensation, a deep, resonant lullaby for a world slowly waking. The monotonous yet intricate sounds washing over Eldrin like a warm, heavy wave, his eyelids growing heavy as he watched the dust motes dance in the sunbeam, the rhythmic plink, plink, merging with the sword's hum and the stone's pulse in his ears, a symphony of thaw and stillness pulling him gently towards sleep right there at his bench, the half-polished latch forgotten in his slackening grip. Chapter 17, The Seed of Ironwood. Spring, tentative and damp, crept further into the Greyfang valleys, painting the lower slopes with the faintest haze of green as new growth struggled through the wet earth. The constant drip from Eldrin's eaves slowed, replaced by the busy chatter of returning birds and the fuller, more confident rush of Stone Creek below the village. Inside the workshop, the equilibrium of the artifacts adjusted subtly. The rider's stone's pulse seemed brighter, more vigorous, resonating with the returning life outside, while the void iron shield boss's profound silence felt even deeper, a cool counterbalance to the burgeoning energy, its contained starlight holding a sharper clarity. The spirit-calming sword maintained its constant, grounding hum, an unchanging anchor. Eldrin found himself drawn more often to the small, south-facing window, watching the slow greening, feeling the slight but definite increase in the sun's warmth on his face when he opened the door. The mud on the path hardened into ruts, and villagers arrived with tools dulled by the winter's idleness or the first labors of the new season. He repaired a bent plowshare, its tip gnawed by hidden rocks in the thaw-softened fields, the rhythmic hammering a familiar counterpoint to the artifact's song. He reforged the broken chain for the village well bucket, the clatter of links a temporary, sharper note in the workshop's soundscape before being absorbed into the deep quiet. Then, one morning when the air held the clean scent of wet earth and pine sap, old Man Hemlock, the village's oldest resident, whose back was bent like a wind-gnarled tree, shuffled into the workshop, leaning heavily on a staff of polished ironwood. His eyes, faded but sharp, scanned the artifacts with quiet awe before settling on Eldrin. He didn't speak immediately, instead carefully unwrapping a cloth bundle clutched in his gnarled hand. Within lay a single object, an ironwood seed pod, larger than any Eldrin had seen, roughly the size of a small apple, its dark, intricately ridged surface weathered smooth by time, yet radiating a palpable sense of immense age and latent power. It felt warm, almost vibrating faintly in Hemlock's palm. Found it, Hemlock rasped, his voice like stones grinding together, in the heart of the old sentinel, struck down in the big storm 10 winters back. Always meant to bring it. Too heavy with memory for planting, I reckon. But maybe not too heavy for your fire, Eldrin Thorne. He placed the seed pod gently on the workbench beside the rider's stone. The moment it touched the wood, a visible, subtle tremor seemed to pass through the rider's stone. Its golden pulse flickered, intensified, then settled into a slightly faster, warmer rhythm. The spirit-calming sword's hum deepened momentarily, resonating with the deep, slow vibration Eldrin could now feel emanating from the seed pod itself, a thrumming bass note of centuries of growth, storm winds, deep roots, and enduring life. The void iron's silence seemed to deepen around it, not suppressing, but containing its potent energy, making the ancient life force within feel focused, dense. Eldrin picked up the seed pod. It was surprisingly heavy for wood, dense as stone, warm to the touch, humming against his skin with the accumulated resonance of generations, perhaps centuries, locked within its compact form. It wasn't just a seed, it was an archive of the forest, a note of concentrated arboreal memory and power. Hemlock's words echoed, too heavy with memory for planting. Perhaps it was meant for something else, a vessel not for soil, but for craft. The challenge stirred within Eldrin, different from shaping void iron or healing the lute. This wasn't about imposing form or restoring harmony, but about unfolding, about releasing and guiding the immense, ancient potential slumbering within the wood, what could be forged from the heartwood of time itself. The rider's stone pulsed warmly beside it, the sword hummed its grounding note, the shield boss held its profound silence. The workshop, filled with the scent of old wood, hot metal, and the damp promise of spring, seemed to hold its breath, the rhythmic drip replaced by the deep, slow thrum of the ancient seed, waiting, resonating with the artifacts and the old smith's quiet contemplation. Chapter 18, The Anvil of Time. The ironwood seed pod sat on Eldrin's workbench, a dense, warm weight humming with ancient life, its deep resonance subtly harmonizing with the rider's stone's brighter pulse and the spirit-calming sword's grounding hum, while the void iron shield boss's profound silence contained its vibrant energy like a deep vessel. Eldrin didn't rush. He spent days simply observing, feeling the seed's unique vibration, letting its deep song of roots and seasons seep into his awareness. He consulted no scrolls, for this was beyond written lore. This was a dialogue with the wood itself, a listening deeper than he had attempted even with the heartwood lute. The seed wasn't discordant, it was full, overflowing, potent beyond measure. Its heaviness, not a flaw but an intensity needing expression. Traditional fire was clearly wrong. The seed radiated life, not metal. Flame would only consume its story. He needed to unlock it, not melt it. Inspiration came slowly, pieced together from the artifacts, responses and the seed's own deep thrum. The rider's stone pulsed warmly near it, its calming power perhaps able to soothe the intensity, to make the ancient memories accessible. The void iron's silence could provide the perfect, undisturbed space for the unfolding. The sword's constant hum offered a stable foundation. Eldrin prepared a space. He cleared a section of his thick, scarred oak workbench, sanding it smooth. In the center, he placed a flat disc of polished greenstone, cool and receptive. Around this, he arranged the artifacts, the rider's stone to one side, its golden light bathing the space, the void iron shield boss opposite, its profound stillness creating a bubble of utter quiet over the greenstone disc. The spirit-calming sword remained on its wall brackets, but its low hum permeated the entire workshop, a constant backdrop. Finally, he placed the ironwood seed pod onto the cool greenstone disc within the sphere of silence. The effect was immediate. The seed's deep thrumming seemed to deepen, becoming clearer, more focused, resonating powerfully against the greenstone. The rider's stone pulsed in time, its light intensifying, washing over the seed like warm sunshine. Eldrin sat before this arrangement, closing his eyes, breathing slowly. He reached out not with intent to shape, but with an invitation, a key. He focused on the rider's stone's warm resonance, channeling its calming, unlocking energy towards the seed. Simultaneously, he leaned into the void iron's profound silence, using it as a conduit to listen, to create a space where the seed's deepest memories could surface without fear of being scattered or lost. He began to hum, matching the fundamental note of the seed's deep thrum, weaving into it the grounding resonance of the spirit-calming sword. The hum wasn't loud, but deep, resonant, filling the bubble of silence created by the shield boss. Amplified by the greenstone disc, the seed pod began to respond. Its ridged surface seemed to shimmer, not with light, but with a subtle vibration. The deep thrumming intensified, then shifted, becoming more complex, layers of sound emerging. The deep groan of massive roots shifting in dark earth, the high whisper of wind through countless needles, the sharp crack of winter ice on branches, the gentle patter of summer rain on a vast canopy, the low creak of immense growth over centuries. Eldrin held the hum, steady, receptive, a sounding board for the ancient wood's song. He felt impressions flood his awareness, not images, but sensations. The rough bark of a sapling under his fingers, the cool dampness of deep forest soil, the fierce resistance to a mountain gale, the patient absorption of sunlight year after year. The seed pod wasn't softening like metal, it was unfurling, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. The tightly closed seams of the pod began to loosen. A faint, resinous scent, ancient and sweet, like petrified sap, filled the silent space. A sliver of darkness appeared between the ridges. Eldrin maintained his focus, his hum a constant anchor, the rider's stone pulsing warmth, the void iron holding the space, the sword humming its grounding note. The unfurling continued, deliberate, slow as tree growth itself. The pod didn't burst open, but gracefully relaxed, its ridged sections peeling back like the petals of a dark, wooden flower, revealing not a kernel, but a dense, complex core of whorled and knotted heartwood, glowing with a deep, internal amber light, radiating condensed centuries of arboreal memory and power. The deep thrumming now emanated clearly from this exposed heartwood core, a complex symphony of the forest's life layered over the deep bass note of time. The unlocking was complete. The immense potential lay revealed, not diminished, but focused, radiant, resting on the greenstone anvil of time, humming its ancient song within the profound quiet, awaiting the next step in its transformation. The rhythmic unfurling in the deep, layered resonance, a hypnotic focal point in the warm, silent workshop. Chapter 19, The Heartwood's Whisper. The unfurled ironwood seed pod lay upon the cool, greenstone disc, its once tightly closed ridges now gracefully peeled back like the petals of some primordial night-blooming flower, revealing the dense, complex core of heartwood within. This core pulsed with a deep, internal amber light, radiating not heat, but a tangible, ancient vitality, a condensed essence of centuries of towering growth. Deep roots gripping mountain stone, storms endured, sunlight absorbed, seasons turned. Its resonance filled the bubble of profound silence maintained by the void iron shield boss, a complex, layered symphony. The deep, groaning bass of roots shifting in bedrock, the high, sighing counterpoint of wind through countless needles, the sharp percussion of ice cracking on branches, the soft, rhythmic patter of rain on a vast canopy, all underpinned by the slow, inexorable thrum of time itself, centuries condensed into a single, vibrating point. The rider's stone pulsed its warm, golden light directly onto the exposed heartwood, its calming energy seeming to soothe the raw intensity of the memories, making them accessible, fluid, less a torrent and more a deep, navigable river. The spirit-calming sword's constant, grounding hum resonated through the oak workbench, up through the greenstone disc, and into the heartwood, providing a stable, harmonic foundation for the arboreal symphony to unfold upon. Eldrin sat before this convergence of artifact and ancient wood, his own resonant hum now silent. His role shifted from unlocking to listening, deeply and completely. He closed his eyes, letting the complex vibrations flow through him, the deep root groan vibrating his spine, the wind sigh whispering against his eardrums, the ice crack a sharp jolt in his nerves, the rain patter a cool sensation on his skin, the thrum of time a slow, heavy pulse in his chest. Impressions solidified into sensations beyond sound. The rough, resinous texture of millennia-old bark beneath imagined fingertips, the cool, damp scent of leaf litter and rich, dark earth, the fierce, defiant resistance against a gale's force vibrating in his muscles, the patient, passive warmth of sunlight absorbed over countless dawns. The heartwood wasn't inert material waiting to be shaped. It was a consciousness, a repository of forest wisdom, singing its history and its potential. Eldrin understood, crafting this wasn't about imposing form, but about asking, about guiding, about finding the shape the ancient wood wished to take. The purpose encoded within its dense rings. he extended his awareness, not with demand, but with gentle inquiry, projecting his intent through the stable field created by the sword's hum, amplified by the rider's stone's warmth, contained by the shield boss's silence. What form holds your strength? What vessel carries your song? He placed his calloused hands, palms down, not touching the heartwood, but hovering just above its glowing surface, feeling the intense vibration humming against his skin. He waited, patient as the wood itself, his breath slow and deep, matching the slow thrum of time emanating from the core. The symphony within the silence shifted subtly, the groaning roots softened, the wind sigh became a focused breath, the ice crack diminished, the rain patter steadied, the deep amber light within the heartwood pulsed, seeming to flow towards the center, coalescing. A distinct impression formed in Eldrin's mind, not an image, but a feeling, a curve, smooth and strong, like a sheltering bough, a point, sharp as a winter icicle, yet grounded, a sense of warding, of boundary, of protection born not of defiance, but of deep-rooted presence, a guardian's form. The heartwood's resonance clarified around this feeling, the deep root grown becoming a solid foundation, the wind sigh shaping the curve, the ice crack refining the point, the rain patter smoothing the surface, the thrum of time binding it all with enduring strength. The amber light pulsed brighter, illuminating swirling grain patterns within the dense core that seemed to align, subtly, towards this envisioned purpose. Eldrin understood. The seed wasn't meant for a weapon, nor merely an ornament. It yearned to become a ward, a sentinel piece, perhaps a protective amulet or the central focus of a boundary marker, imbued with the enduring, protective spirit of the ancient forest it sprang from. The path was revealed not by his design, but by the wood's own whispered desire, resonating clearly within the artifact held silence, the rider's stone pulsing its warm approval, the sword humming its steady support, the void iron's profound chill ensuring the ancient whisper was heard without distortion, the rhythmic, layered symphony of forest memory and timeless intent, a deep, resonant lullaby for the soul, drawing Eldrin deeper into communion with the slumbering will of the mountain wood. Chapter 20, The Growth Shaping. The purpose resonated clear within the silent crucible formed by the artifacts. The ancient ironwood heartwood core sought to become a ward, a sentinel, a focus of protective energy born from deep roots and enduring presence. Eldrin's task shifted from listening to facilitating, becoming a conduit for the wood's own intent, guiding its latent energy into the desired form. Traditional carving tools felt utterly wrong, invasive. This required a symbiosis of spirit, resonance, and touch. He recalled the unfurling, a gentle yielding, not forced opening. He would need to encourage the wood to grow into its new shape. Guided by the combined energies of the artifacts and his focused will, he began by deepening his connection, placing his fingertips lightly, reverently, on the very edge of the exposed heartwood core, not pressing, simply making contact. The deep thrumming intensified, vibrating up his arm. The groan of roots, the sigh of wind. He closed his eyes, matching his breathing to the slow pulse of time within the wood. He visualized the curve, the point, the solid base, projecting this image not as a command, but as an offering, a suggestion, amplified by the rider's stone's warm light bathing his hands and the wood, stabilized by the sword's grounding hum resonating through the bench, contained and focused by the shield boss's profound silence eliminating distractions. His touch became an extension of the stone's energy, warm, encouraging, unlocking the wood's innate capacity to adapt. He applied the faintest pressure, not to cut or compress, but to guide, like a gardener training a young branch. Simultaneously, he subtly shifted the resonant field, focusing the spirit-calming sword's hum into a more localized vibration beneath the area needing definition. The future point, the deep, grounding note concentrated there, resonating with the heartwood's own dense structure, subtly encouraging compaction, refinement. For the sweeping curve, he channeled the rider's stone's warmth along the intended path, its gentle, unlocking pulse persuading the dense fibers to relax minutely, to flow towards the envisioned arc. The void iron's silence remained the essential canvas, ensuring each subtle vibrational nudge was precise, undiluted, allowing the wood to respond purely to the guided resonance and Eldrin's intent-laden touch. The process was agonizingly slow, measured in heartbeats and breaths. Eldrin worked in near trance, his world reduced to the vibration under his fingertips, the interplay of warmth and grounding resonance, the profound quiet, the complex symphony of the forest's memory flowing through him. he felt minute shifts, a slight yielding beneath his guiding finger tracing the curve, a subtle densification under the focused hum at the point. The ember light within the heartwood flowed, following the paths of guidance, illuminating the internal transformation. The surface grain seemed to ripple, realigning along the suggested form. He used no tools but his hands and the artifact's power. Occasionally, he would lift his touch entirely, allowing the wood a moment to integrate the change, to settle into its new configuration. During these pauses, the heartwood song would deepen, resonating with the newly forming shape, affirming the path. The curve became more pronounced, sweeping gracefully like a sheltering arm. The point emerged, sharp and defined, humming with concentrated grounding energy. The base broadened slightly, resonating with the deep root grown. Feeling immovable, Eldrin adjusted the resonant fields minutely, the sword's hum shifting here, the stone's warmth intensifying there, always in response to the wood's feedback. A continuous, silent dialogue. Sweat beaded on his brow, not from exertion, but from intense focus. The scent of ancient resin and warm, living wood filled the silent space, mingling with the ozone tang of the void iron and the warm, mineral scent of the writer's stone. Hours bled together, the light from the high window shifted. The heartwood core, once a rough, complex knot, now bore the unmistakable, elegant form of a protective ward. A smooth, sweeping curve culminating in a sharp point, grounded by a broad, stable base, its surface swirling with grain patterns that seemed to depict miniature forests and mountain roots beneath the glowing amber light. It was not carved, but grown shapen, its form an intrinsic expression of its essence and purpose, resonating powerfully with protective energy, a perfect harmony of ancient memory and guided intent, the rhythmic pulse of its light and the deep, satisfied thrum of its song merging with the artifact's steady presence into a profound, resonating stillness that felt like the deep peace of an ancient grove at dawn. Chapter 21, The Binding Sap. The ward-shaped heartwood core lay upon the greenstone disc, its form complete, the sweeping curve a guardian's embrace, the sharp point a focused warning, the broad base rooted in immovable strength, its surface alive with swirling grain patterns that seemed to shift like slow-moving clouds beneath the deep, internal amber glow. Its song resonated powerfully within the artifact-held silence. The deep root grown now a solid foundation hum, the wind sigh a protective whisper along the curve, the ice crack condensed into the point's sharp resonance, the rain patter a smooth, flowing vibration across the surface, all bound together by the slow, enduring thrum of time. The physical shaping was done, grown through resonance and guided intent, but the immense energy, the concentrated forest memory and protective will, needed binding, sealing into this new form to make it a true, enduring ward. Traditional finishes, oils, resins, lacquers, felt inadequate, foreign. This binding needed to be of the wood itself, a continuation of its life force. Eldrin remembered the faint, resinous scent released during the unfurling, the petrified sap, the lifeblood of the ancient tree, held within the dense heartwood. He needed to awaken it, to draw it forth as the binding agent. He prepared a simple catalyst, pure meltwater from the highest, untouched snowfield, infused with sunlight by leaving it in a crystal flask on the workshop's sunniest spot for a full day. This water held the essence of pure renewal. Placing the flask of sun-infused water beside the ward, Eldrin returned his fingertips to the heartwood, this time not guiding form, but seeking connection with the deep, slumbering resin within. He focused the writer's stone's warm pulse deep into the core of the ward, not to soften, but to gently warm from within, mimicking the slow, internal heat of a living tree in sunlight. Simultaneously, he channeled a specific harmonic from the spirit-calming sword's hum, a vibration that resonated with the slow flow of sap, a patient, rising energy. The void iron's silence deepened, focusing this combined energy inward. Eldrin visualized the dormant resin, deep within the dense fibers, thick and golden, awakening, becoming fluid, drawn towards the surface by the gentle internal warmth and the resonant call of flowing vitality. He hummed again, low and soft, matching the sap flow harmonic, projecting encouragement. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, tiny beads of a thick, luminous substance, the color of dark honey shot through with amber light, began to well up from the very grain of the heartwood, appearing on the surface of the sweeping curve. The sharp point, the broad base, it wasn't sweat, it was the ancient tree's lifeblood, awakened. the resinous scent intensified, rich, sweet, and deeply woody. Eldrin dipped a fine brush made from a single, stiff bristle of a mountain goat into the sun-infused meltwater. With infinite care, he touched the tip of the dampened brush to one of the emerging resin beads. The effect was immediate. The resin, activated by the water holding sunlight's renewal, spread rapidly from the point of contact, flowing like liquid gold light into the grain. Not sitting on top, it followed the swirling patterns Eldrin had revealed, seeping deep into the microscopic channels and fissures, filling them with its luminous essence. Eldrin worked methodically, touching each emerging bead with the sun-water brush, guiding the awakened resin's flow. The luminous substance moved with purpose, drawn along the paths of the ward's inherent resonance, reinforcing the protective curve, honing the warning point, anchoring the strength of the base. Where it flowed, the amber glow within the heartwood intensified, the grain patterns becoming even clearer, etched in light, and the wood song deepened, gaining a richer, more resonant tone, the protective whisper becoming a clear, strong hum, the foundation hum more solid, the point's resonance sharper yet contained. The resin wasn't a coating, it was an integration, a binding of the awakened life force to the shaped form, sealing the immense memory and power permanently within the ward, turning it from shaped wood into a true artifact of protection. Finally, the flow ceased. The resin had found its paths, binding the ward from within. The surface appeared unchanged, yet profoundly different, denser, smoother, radiating a warm, amber light that pulsed gently in time with the rider's stone, its song now a unified, powerful vibration of rooted guardianship, the rhythmic pulse of light and the deep, resonant hum merging with the artifact's presence into a profound, protective stillness that felt like standing beneath the oldest, strongest tree in the heart of the forest, the scent of ancient sap and clean meltwater lingering in the quiet air. Chapter 22, The Sentinel's Rooting. The completed ward lay upon the greenstone disk, no longer just heartwood, but a vessel of condensed forest sentience. Its form, the sweeping guardian curve, the sharp, focused point, the immovable base, radiated a tangible aura of protection, a quiet power that seemed to push back unease and solidify the very air around it. The internal amber light pulsed steadily, illuminating the intricate grain patterns now permanently etched in luminous resin, depicting miniature root systems delving deep and protective canopies arching high. Its song was a deep, unified hum of enduring strength and watchful guardianship, resonating perfectly with the spirit-calming sword's grounding note and harmonizing warmly with the rider's stone's pulse. The void iron shield boss's profound silence still held the space, but now it felt less like suppression and more like a focused field amplifying the ward's own quiet power. Eldrin carefully lifted the ward. It felt heavier than its size suggested, dense with bound energy and ancient memory, yet perfectly balanced in his hand. The warm amber light flowed over his fingers, and the protective hum vibrated gently against his palm, a comforting, powerful presence. The question remained, where did such a sentinel belong? Its power wasn't personal, it was territorial, meant to anchor a boundary, guard a threshold, root protection into a specific place. The artifacts had guided its creation, perhaps they would guide its placement. Eldrin carried the ward towards the workshop door. The artifacts, resonances subtly shifting as he moved. The rider's stone's pulse seemed to brighten, the sword's hum deepened slightly, the shield boss's silence focused. He opened the heavy oak door, stepping out into the crisp, late spring afternoon. Sunlight, stronger now, washed over the stone step, illuminating the patch of earth just beyond the threshold where the path began. Churned by countless boots, Eldrin stood on the step, the ward cradled in his hands, and opened his awareness. He felt the subtle energies of the place, the deep, steady grounding of the mountain beneath, the vibrant, returning life of the forest nearby, the flow of the creek below, the lingering human resonance of the path. He held the ward aloft slightly, not imposing, but offering. The ward's hum shifted subtly, deepening, resonating strongly with the solid bedrock beneath the thin soil, its protective curve seeming to orient instinctively towards the path and the village beyond, its point subtly aligning with the direction of the highest, wildest peaks. The rider's stone, visible through the open door on its bench, pulsed a warm, affirmative gold. The spirit-calming sword's hum steadied, the void iron silence held, waiting. The spot felt right, a natural anchoring point between the workshop's sanctuary and the world beyond. Eldrin knelt on the hard-packed earth just outside the threshold, With his bare hands, he dug a small hole, deep enough to reach the cooler, undisturbed soil beneath. The earth felt alive, welcoming. He placed the ward into the hole, its broad base settling firmly, its point aimed skyward, its protective curve facing outwards. As he carefully pushed the soil back, packing it firmly around the base, he felt the ward's resonance change. The deep hum deepened further, vibrating into the bedrock, spreading outwards like roots. The amber light pulsed once, strongly, then seemed to dim, not fade, but sink into the wood and the earth around it. A profound sense of calm, of solidity, of watchful presence, emanated from the spot, a subtle field extending several paces around the threshold. It wasn't a barrier, but a declaration, a rooting of protective intent into the very land. The path felt safer, the workshop doorway felt more defined, a clear transition guarded by ancient wood and bound purpose. Eldrin stood, brushing the soil from his hands. The ward was invisible now, buried to its base, only the elegant curve and the sharp point visible above the earth, looking like a naturally shaped stone or a peculiarly grown root protrusion. But its presence was undeniable, a quiet sentinel humming its watchful song into the mountain stone. Back inside, closing the door, the workshop felt subtly different. The artifacts, resonances settled into a new equilibrium, harmonizing with the ward's rooted power just beyond. The threshold, the rider's stone pulsed warmly, the sword hummed contentedly, the shield boss held its deep silence, and now, woven into their symphony, was the new, grounding thrum of the sentinel ward, its protective energy blending with the profound quiet, creating a complex, deeply anchored lullaby of safety and enduring watchfulness. The scent of fresh earth and ancient resin lingering in the air as Eldrin sat by the forge, the rhythmic pulse of light and resonant hums drawing him into a state of peaceful vigilance, his eyes closing not in sleep, but in deep, quiet communion with the rooted guardianship now established at his door. Chapter 23, The Hearth of Resonant Stone. Summer unfurled its green banner across the Greyfang valleys with a quiet intensity. The snow retreated entirely to the highest peaks, leaving behind slopes vibrant with wildflowers and the deep, rich green of conifers drinking in the lengthening days. Sunlight, stronger and holding genuine warmth now, streamed through Eldrin's high window for longer periods, painting bright rectangles on the stone floor that crept slowly across the workshop as the hours passed, illuminating dancing motes of dust and glinting off the polished surfaces of tools hung patiently on the walls. The profound quiet held within the workshop, woven from the spirit-calming sword's constant, grounding hum resonating through the stone, the rider's stone's warm, golden pulse beating steadily on its obsidian stand, the void iron shield boss's deep, silent chill radiating its sphere of utter stillness, and now, subtly underpinning it all, the deep, resonant thrum of the sentinel ward rooted just beyond the threshold. This quiet was no longer merely an absence, but a rich, layered presence, a complex harmony that seemed to deepen the coolness within the stone walls even as the summer sun warmed the outside air. The sentinel ward's influence was palpable. Villagers approaching the workshop path often paused, a look of vague surprise crossing their features as they stepped into its subtle field, reporting a sudden sense of calm, of groundedness, as if the mountain itself had laid a reassuring hand on their shoulder, the ward's protective hum vibrating up through the soles of their boots, a silent welcome before they even reached the door. Eldrin moved through this resonant sanctuary with a deep sense of custodianship, his task simple and rhythmic, refining the edge of a woodsman's felling axe with long, smooth strokes on the waterstone. Shhhk, shhhk, shhhk. The sound softened and contained within the artifact held quiet, mending the cracked handle of a butter churn with strong, flexible willow withes and a touch of pine pitch glue, the earthy scent mingling with the ever-present aroma of hot metal, oiled leather, and the faint, clean ozone of the void iron. The forge fire burned low, mostly for light and the occasional heating of a rivet, its crackle a familiar bass note in the workshop's symphony. One such afternoon, when the sun slanted golden through the window, illuminating the swirling nebulae on the shield boss and making the rider's stone glow like a captured sun, a hesitant knock, softer than usual, echoed in the deep quiet. Eldrin opened the door to find Anya, the shy potter's apprentice, her arms cradling a heavy, cloth-wrapped bundle. Her eyes, wide and earnest, darted past him to the artifacts, filled with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "Master Thorne," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper against the workshop's resonant field. I found this in the clay bank by the creek." After the big melt, it sings to the clay. Makes it restless. Master Pot says it's just odd stone, but, she trailed off, unwrapping the bundle with reverent care, revealed was a hefty, uncut geode, roughly the size of a loaf of bread, its outer surface a dull, knobby gray basalt, but where a natural fracture had occurred, it revealed an inner cavity lined with thousands of tiny, perfect amethyst crystals, glittering with a deep purple inner fire even in the dim light of the doorway. The moment the crystals were exposed, Eldrin felt it, a distinct, high-pitched harmonic resonance, sharp and clear as a struck wineglass, vibrating against the lower frequencies of the workshop's artifacts. The rider's stone's pulse flickered, its light deepening towards violet at the edges. The spirit-calming sword's hum shifted minutely, accommodating the new tone. The void iron's silence seemed to deepen, focusing on the intrusion. The sentinel ward's thrum outside remained steady, a bedrock against the crystalline chime. Anya flinched slightly at the sensation. See? It sings. And when it's near the wet clay, the clay shivers. Tries to move towards it. We can't center anything properly. Master Pot says throw it back, but, she looked pleadingly at Eldrin, it feels important. Like it wants something. Eldrin nodded slowly, his experienced senses parsing the geode's resonance. It wasn't hostile, but intensely focused, a vibration attuned to earth, to mineral cohesion, perhaps to the very essence of form waiting within formless matter. It resonated with potential, a song of crystallization, of hidden beauty and structured growth. He accepted the heavy geode, its crystalline song vibrating up his arms, a counterpoint to the deep hums and silence surrounding him. Placed on the workbench near the rider's stone, the amethyst cavity seemed to drink the golden light, reflecting it back in deep violet sparkles. Its high, clear harmonic wove itself into the existing symphony, not discordant, but adding a new, bright strand to the tapestry of quiet. Anya sighed, a sound of profound relief that seemed amplified in the resonant space. Thank you, Master Thorne, she whispered, bowing quickly before darting back out into the summer sun. Eldrin stood before the geode, feeling its insistent song. It didn't need forging or shaping like metal, nor unfolding like the hardwood. Its power lay in its inherent structure, its perfect crystalline resonance. Perhaps it sought not to be made into something else, but to be understood, to have its song amplified and directed. It felt like a hearthstone, not for fire, but for resonant energy, a focus for Earth's song. The rider's stone pulsed warmly beside it, its light now subtly tinged with violet where it touched the crystals. The sword hummed its grounding note, providing stability. The shield boss held its silence, offering a perfect acoustic chamber. The sentinel ward thrummed outside, connecting it to the deep earth. The geode's high harmonic seemed to settle, finding its place within the complex weave, its sharp clarity adding definition to the deep quiet rather than shattering it. The workshop's symphony grew richer, more intricate. The deep bass, the warm pulse, the profound silence, the grounding thrum, and now the bright, clear chime of crystalline potential, all resonating together in a harmony that felt both ancient and newly born. The rhythmic interplay of vibrations creating a profound, layered lullaby that seemed to settle the very dust in the sunbeams, drawing Eldrin into a state of deep, resonant contemplation before the glittering heart of the earth. Chapter 24, The Crystal's Clarion. The amethyst geode remained on Eldrin's workbench, its fractured face revealing the glittering cavern of purple crystals, now pulsing with a soft, internal light that deepened from lavender to profound violet in rhythm with the rider's stone's warm gold. Its high, clear harmonic resonance had integrated seamlessly into the workshop's symphony, no longer an intrusion but a bright, defining thread woven into the tapestry of deep hums, steady pulses, and profound silence. Eldrin observed it, not with the intent to alter its form, but to understand its nature and purpose within the resonant sanctuary he tended. Anya's words echoed, it sings to the clay, makes it restless. The geode resonated with the potential within unformed matter, a vibration that agitated the primal clay, urging it towards structure, towards its own inherent beauty. It wasn't a tool for crafting by Eldrin, but a catalyst for crafting, an amplifier for the latent forms sleeping within raw earth. The rider's stone pulsed beside it, its light mingling with the geode's violet glow on the scarred oak surface. Eldrin placed his hand lightly on the rough, cool basalt shell surrounding the crystals. Closing his eyes, he felt the sharp, clear vibration humming against his palm, a focused energy humming with the song of perfect angles, of molecular alignment, of hidden order emerging from chaos. He extended his awareness, matching his internal resonance to the geode's harmonic. The clarity was startling, cutting through mental fog, sharpening perception. He focused this amplified clarity, channeled by the rider's stone's warm energy and grounded by the spirit-calming sword's deep hum, towards a simple lump of ordinary river clay he kept for patching forge linings, resting on a corner of the bench, projecting the geode's resonant song, the vibration of potential form, towards the inert clay. The effect was subtle but immediate. The clay, which had been a dull, lifeless brown, seemed to quiver minutely. Its surface tension changed, becoming slightly more receptive, more fluid. Eldrin didn't shape it, he simply held the resonant intention. The geode's harmonic focused through his touch and will. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the clay began to move. It wasn't flowing like liquid, but creeping, reshaping itself with glacial slowness, drawn towards the source of the resonant field. The geode itself, it formed a low, smooth dome, then subtle ridges began to appear on its surface, mimicking, in abstract form, the facets of the crystals within the geode. It was the clay seeking its own crystalline potential, guided by the geode's insistent song. The void iron shield boss's profound silence ensured the resonance remained pure, undiluted by stray thoughts or external noise, allowing the clay to respond solely to the directed harmonic. The sentinel ward's deep thrum outside provided the stable earth resonance, the foundation upon which this transformation could occur. After an hour, the lump of clay had reshaped itself into a small, abstract sculpture, a smooth, basalt-like base cradling a cluster of faceted, purple-tinged peaks, a miniature echo of the geode that had inspired it, hardened slightly by the focused energy. Its song was a faint, earthy hum, harmonizing softly with the geode's clear chime. Eldrin understood. The geode was a clarion, a resonant focus capable of awakening and guiding the latent forms within raw earth, stone, perhaps even metal on a fundamental level. It wasn't for him to wield directly, but to be placed, to sing its song into a space where forming happened, like Anya's pottery shed, to help the clay find its true shape with less effort, more harmony. The artifacts around it seemed to agree. The rider's stone pulsed warmly, its light bathing the transformed clay model. The sword hummed its steady note, the shield boss held its silence, the ward thrummed its grounding presence. The geode's own light pulsed brighter, its harmonic clear and satisfied, having found its purpose, not as a crafted object, but as a resonant hearthstone for the birth of form. Its bright, crystalline chime a clear, defining note in the workshop's deepening symphony of quiet, the rhythmic pulse of its light and the pure tone of its song weaving a hypnotic pattern within the warm, resonant stillness of the summer afternoon. Chapter 25, The Potter's Harmony. The revelation of the geode's purpose settled within Eldrin like a perfectly balanced weight. It belonged not in his forge sanctuary, but where primal matter yearned for form, the potter's shed. The next morning, carrying the heavy geode wrapped carefully in soft linen, its resonant song muffled but still humming against his chest, he walked down the muddy path softened by summer rain, the scent of wet earth and blooming fireweed thick in the air. Stepping into the sentinel ward's field near his threshold brought the usual wave of calm grounding, a stark contrast to the slight agitation he felt emanating from the covered geode. Eager to sing, the village bustled with summer activity, the clang of the blacksmith, a distant cousin, working on wagon fittings, children's shouts near the creek, the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of the fulling mill downstream, sounds that felt loud and disjointed after the profound quiet of his workshop, yet softened slightly by the ward's influence as he passed. Reaching the small, clay-daubed pottery shed nestled near the creek bank, Eldrin pushed open the door. The air inside was cool, damp, and thick with the rich, primal scent of wet clay. Master Pot, a stout man with forearms like knotted oak, was wrestling a large lump of dark, wet clay onto his kick wheel, his brow furrowed in concentration. Nearby, Anya was patiently wedging air from a smaller lump, her movements careful but tense. The moment Eldrin entered, the covered geode in his arms, the atmosphere shifted subtly. The clay on Master Pot's wheel seemed to twitch, losing its center slightly. Anya looked up, her eyes wide. Master Thorne. You brought it. Master Pot grunted, pausing his efforts, wiping clay-smeared hands on his leather apron, eyeing the bundle skeptically. That singing rock. Hope you've come to toss it in the deep pool, Eldrin. Nothing but trouble. Eldrin unwrapped the geode, placing it gently on a sturdy, solid oak shelf against the sunniest wall of the shed. The moment it touched the wood, its high, clear harmonic resonance rang out, sharp and pure in the enclosed space. The rider's stone's distant pulse, carried through Eldrin's connection, seemed to resonate faintly within the shed, a warm undertone. The effect on the clay was immediate and profound. The large lump on Master Pot's wheel ceased its restless twitching. It seemed to sigh, settling into perfect, obedient stillness, its surface becoming smoother, more receptive. Anya's wedged clay became pliant, almost eager under her hands. By the stone, Master Pot breathed, staring at his suddenly centered clay. What in the... Eldrin explained simply, it doesn't shape for you, Master Pot. It sings to the potential within the clay itself. Helps it find its center, its true form. Less fight, more flow. He guided Anya to place her lump of clay on the wheel near the geode. As she began to kick the wheel, her hands hovering, the geode's harmonic seemed to focus. The clay rose under her tentative touch, not with resistance, but with a willing upward spiral, as if it knew the shape it wished to become. A simple, elegant vase. Her hands followed, guided less by force and more by the clay's own movement. The resonant field encouraging symmetry, smoothness. Master Pot watched, dumbfounded, as Anya's usually hesitant work transformed into confident, fluid motion. He returned to his own wheel. The clay responded with unprecedented ease, centering instantly, rising tall and straight for a storage jar with minimal effort. The harsh lines of concentration on his face softened into wonder. The air in the shed changed. The usual tense focus gave way to a harmonious quiet, punctuated only by the soft whir of the wheels, the wet sloop of clay under skilled hands, and the clear, bright harmonic of the geode, weaving through it all like a guiding thread. The primal scent of earth mingled with the clean, mineral tang of the crystals. Anya's vase emerged, perfectly proportioned, its curves flowing. Master Pot's jar stood tall and sturdy. Both pieces seemed to hum faintly with an inner vitality. Touched by the geode's song, the resonant hearthstone had found its home. Its bright, clarifying chime resonated not against the deep quiet of Eldrin's sanctuary, but within the earthy harmony of creation, a new voice in the village's summer song, its clear tone a lullaby not for sleep, but for the focused, peaceful flow of making. The rhythmic whir of the wheel and the soft sounds of shaping clay merging with the crystalline harmonic into a melody of deep, grounded creativity as Eldrin slipped quietly out, leaving the potters to their newfound harmony. The geode's song, a bright, distant chime, carried on the warm breeze back towards his own resonant sanctuary on the mountainside. Chapter 26. The Bellows, Sigh. Midsummer draped the Greyfang slopes in a cloak of deep, humid green. The air hung thick with the scent of sun-warmed pine resin, damp earth, and the sweet perfume of wild honeysuckle cascading down rocky outcrops. Inside Eldrin's workshop, the profound resonance, the spirit-calming sword's grounding hum vibrating the stones, the rider's stone's warm pulse casting long, golden shadows, the void iron shield boss's deep silence holding the space, and the sentinel ward's rooted thrum resonating through the threshold, created a sanctuary of cool, focused quiet that defied the season's languid heat. The sunbeam through the high window was a solid bar of molten gold, thick with dancing dust motes that seemed to slow, suspended, within the artifact-dampened air. Eldrin worked with deliberate slowness, the heat making even simple tasks feel weighty. He was meticulously cleaning the massive bellows, a task long overdue, removing years of accumulated charcoal dust and greasy soot from the leather folds and the stout oak frame. The rhythmic scrape of his stiff bristled brush and the soft thump as he dislodged clumps of grime were the loudest sounds, yet they felt muffled, absorbed into the deep quiet. The familiar scent of old leather, wood ash, and metal polish mingled with the ever-present ozone of the void iron. The bellows themselves, a relic as old as the forge, seemed to sigh with relief as layers of grime were removed, their heavy leather supple beneath the grime. As he worked near the mouth of the cold forge, Eldrin noticed something peculiar wedged deep in the hinge mechanism where the bellows arm met the frame. Not grime, but a small, hard object. Carefully prying it loose with a thin chisel, he retrieved a lump of metal, roughly the size of a walnut, coated in a century's worth of compacted soot. He cleaned it meticulously, revealing not iron or steel, but a dense, dull gray metal, incredibly heavy for its size, cold to the touch even in the summer warmth, its surface pitted and scarred but hinting at a strange, oily sheen beneath the grime. Holding it, he felt Nothing, not the latent song of sky iron, the deep resonance of earth steel, the bright chime of sun copper, nor even the profound negation of void iron. It felt inert, utterly dead, absorbing the vibrations of the sword's hum and the stone's pulse like a sponge, leaving a curious hollow sensation in his palm. It was damp iron, a metal mentioned only in the oldest, most obscure Thorne scrolls, described as the eater of echoes, found only in the deepest, lightless caverns where sound itself went to die, useless for forging as it refused heat and shattered under the hammer, absorbing all resonance into perfect silence. A forgotten curiosity, perhaps dropped by an ancestor, lodged and buried by time. Eldrin placed the cold, dense lump on the workbench near the writer's stone. The stone's golden pulse seemed to dim slightly where its light touched the damp iron, as if its energy were being subtly drained. The sword's hum didn't change pitch, but its vibration felt slightly dampened nearby. The void iron's silence deepened, but differently, not an active field, but a passive absorption, a void where resonance simply ceased to exist. The sentinel wards from outside remained strong, unaffected. The lump sat there, a tiny black hole of silence, radiating a profound, unsettling absence of song. It wasn't hostile, like corrupted metal, but profoundly empty, a perfect counterpoint to the geode's bright clarion call in the pottery shed. Eldrin pondered its potential, useless for blades or armor, but perhaps a prison for unwanted echoes. A baffle for chaotic resonance. A foundation stone for absolute quietude. The challenge wasn't shaping it, that seemed impossible, but understanding its absolute null, its place within the spectrum of sound and silence he curated. The workshop's symphony now contained this new, profound absence, a tiny, dense pocket where the deep hums and warm pulses simply vanished, creating a complex interplay of resonance and void. The rhythmic scrape of his brush resuming on the bellows leather a strangely loud sound against the damp iron's localized, sleep-inducing silence. Chapter 27, The Anvil's Memory. The damp iron lump remained on the workbench, a dense, silent enigma radiating its tiny sphere of profound resonance deadening null. Eldrin found himself circling it, not with tools, but with contemplation. Its utter inertness was its defining feature, a perfect counterbalance to the vibrant energies surrounding it, the writer's stone's warm pulse seeming to push against its edge, the spirit-calming sword's hum flattening slightly in its proximity, the void iron shield boss's active silence contrasting sharply with the damp iron's passive void. Even the distant, bright chime of the geode from the pottery shed felt muted when he focused near the small, gray lump. Its potential, he realized, lay not in what it did, but in what it prevented. Perhaps it could be a keystone for a chamber of perfect quiet, a baffle against psychic noise, or a stabilizer for volatile resonances that needed containment. One humid afternoon, as thunder grumbled distantly over the peaks, the air thick and charged, a figure appeared at Eldrin's open doorway, not a villager, but a stranger, tall, thin, wrapped in travel-stained robes of faded blue, his face hidden deep within a hood. Though Eldrin sensed sharp, anxious eyes scanning the resonant sanctuary, the man carried no tool, no burden, only a palpable aura of frantic energy, a discordant jangle of thought and emotion that vibrated harshly against the workshop's deep quiet like a cracked bell. The writer's stone's pulse flickered, its light dimming, the spirit-calming sword's hum deepened, trying to compensate. The void iron's silence intensified, focusing. The sentinel ward's thrum outside remained steady, grounding. The stranger flinched, clutching his head as the artifacts reacted to his inner cacophony. "Smith," the man rasped, his voice strained, grating. "They said, you work with silence." The noise, inside, it never stops. Whispers, screams, memories, like broken glass in my mind. "Can you forge me quiet?" He swayed, overwhelmed by his own internal dissonance and the workshop's attempt to harmonize it. Eldrin gestured to a rough stool near the cold forge, away from the main artifacts but close to where the damp iron lump sat radiating its localized null. The moment the man sat, hunched over, his trembling hands gripping his knees, the edge of the damp iron's influence seemed to touch him. The frantic jittering of his aura lessened fractionally, not calmed, but muffled. The sharp edges of his internal noise softened. He took a shuddering breath. Eldrin didn't speak. He picked up the damp iron lump, its cold, dead weight heavy in his palm, and placed it gently on the stone floor between the stranger's feet. The effect was immediate and profound. The man gasped, his head snapping up, eyes wide with disbelief within the hood's shadow. The chaotic resonance emanating from him didn't vanish, but it was instantly contained, flattened, pressed down into a dull, manageable throb within the small sphere of absolute quiet radiating from the dense metal. The frantic jangle became a distant murmur, the rider's stone's light steadied, warming, the sword's hum smoothed. By the silent depths, the stranger breathed, his voice losing its ragged edge, becoming merely weary. It stops the echo. Just holds it down. He sat for a long time, silent tears tracing paths through the grime on his cheeks, basking in the unprecedented relief of contained noise. Eldrin understood. The damp iron wasn't a cure, but a crutch, a localized zone of null where fractured resonance could be contained, not healed, perhaps set into a floor stone, or worn as a heavy pendant. The workshop symphony adjusted, the deep hums and warm pulses flowing around the small island of profound silence where the broken man sat, finally finding respite. The rhythmic sound of his slowing, deepening breaths, a new, fragile note within the resonant quiet, harmonizing with the artifacts, restored balance. Chapter 28, The Pendant of Still Depths. The stranger, who gave his name as Kale, a scholar whose mind had shattered under the weight of forbidden lore and psychic echoes, remained within the damp iron sphere of null for most of the day, soaking in the profound relief of contained inner noise. The frantic energy bled away, leaving only deep exhaustion and a fragile peace. Eldrin observed, understanding the damp iron's role. Not a healer, but a shield, a localized bastion against resonance. As dusk painted the sky in bruised purples and oranges, Kale stirred, looking at the small, dense lump on the floor with something akin to reverence. It cannot stay here, Smith, he said, his voice low but steady now. The silence, it is a lifeline. But I must move. Can it travel? The answer lay in containment and connection. Eldrin selected a piece of the supple, high mountain goat leather left from the spirit-calming sword's grip wrap, dyed the deep, frosty blue. He cut a thick disc, then carefully molded a sturdy cup from a scrap of sky iron, its light, resonant nature perhaps able to channel the damp iron's null effect outwards without being consumed by it. He annealed the sky iron cup, then set the damp iron lump securely within it. The sky iron didn't sing, it simply held the null, acting as an interface. Eldrin then encased the sky iron cup within the thick blue leather, stitching it tightly with strong sinew thread, creating a smooth, slightly heavy disc pendant. He left one face open, exposing the dull gray damp iron surface, ensuring its nullifying field could emanate freely. Finally, he braided a sturdy cord from the same leather, attaching it securely. When finished, the pendant was a simple, unadorned disc of blue leather, slightly convex, with a circle of cold, dead gray metal at its center. He handed it to Kale. The scholar clasped it in both hands, bringing it close to his chest. Immediately, the sphere of profound quiet centered on him, containing the chaotic resonance within his mind, muffling it to a bearable hum. His shoulders slumped, not in despair, but in profound relief. It's a still depth, Kale whispered, his eyes closed. A pocket of silence I can carry. Not peace, but respite. A harbor. He fastened the cord around his neck, the pendant resting heavily against his sternum. The artifacts in the workshop seemed to settle. The rider's stone pulsed warmly, acknowledging the solution. The sword hummed steadily, the void iron held its silence, the sentinel ward thrummed. Kale bowed deeply to Eldrin, a gesture of immeasurable gratitude, then turned and walked out into the twilight, the pendant's localized null field moving with him, a small, portable oasis of silence against the world's noise. Eldrin watched him go, the deep quiet of the workshop flowing back into the space he left, richer for having served its purpose. The damp iron's potential was confirmed, not for forging, but for shielding, for creating pockets of profound stillness in a resonant world. The rhythmic pulse of the rider's stone and the deep hum of the sword seemed to deepen in the warm, quiet space, the scent of leather and cold metal lingering, weaving a lullaby of contained sanctuary as the first stars appeared in the deep blue above the mountains. Chapter 29, The Storm's Resonance. High summer's heat broke with the violence only mountains could conjure. The sky, a taut, brassy dome for days, split open one sultry afternoon, not with gentle rain, but with a torrential downpour that lashed the slopes like whips, turning paths into rushing streams and Stone Creek into a roaring, brown torrent. Thunder, Not a distant grumble but a world-shattering crack that seemed to split the peaks, rolled continuously, shaking the very stones of Eldrin's cottage. Lightning flared with blinding intensity, turning the downpour into a strobing curtain of silver. Inside the workshop, the resonant sanctuary faced its greatest test. The spirit-calming sword's hum deepened, vibrating strongly through the walls, a constant, grounding note against the external chaos. The rider's stone pulsed rapidly, its golden light flaring with each thunderclap, projecting calm against the shockwaves. The void iron shield boss radiated its profound silence like a shield, dampening the sharpest concussions, turning the deafening booms into deep, muffled thuds. The sentinel ward rooted outside thrummed powerfully, resonating with the bedrock, anchoring the threshold against the storm's fury, its protective field feeling like a solid wall against the wind-driven rain slashing against the door. The damp iron pendant was gone with Kale, but its lesson remained. The storm's violence wasn't just wind and water, but raw, chaotic resonance, the shriek of the gale, the earth-shaking thunder, the sizzle-crack of lightning, the drumming deluge. The artifacts worked in concert, weaving a harmonic counterpoint, the sword grounding the earth shock, the stone calming the air scream, the shield boss silencing the worst of the acoustic assault, the ward rooting the structure. Eldrin stood at the center, not working metal, but acting as a focal point, his own deep calm amplified by the sanctuary, helping to stabilize the resonant field. He felt the immense pressure, the workshop groaning under the onslaught, the artifacts straining. The rider's stone's light flickered wildly, the sword's hum developed a faint, stressed buzz. Even the void iron's silence seemed to waver momentarily under a particularly close, skull-shattering thunderclap. Yet, they held. The storm's fury, though immense, was diffuse, unfocused. The artifacts, each specialized and working in harmony, channeled, absorbed, and transmuted the chaotic resonance. The shrieking wind became a deep howl within the field, then a sigh. The thunder became a drumbeat, then a distant rumble. The drumming rain softened to a steady, rhythmic patter on the roof. The blinding lightning flared, but its accompanying crack was muted. Within the workshop, the air remained charged, thick with ozone, and the petrichor scent of drenched earth carried through cracks. But the overwhelming chaos was subdued, contained within the resonant sanctuary. The deep quiet persisted, layered now with the transmuted sounds of the storm. The deep howl, the rhythmic drumbeat, the steady patter, all woven into the artifact's symphony, not as discord, but as a powerful, transient movement. Eldrin breathed deeply, feeling the immense effort settling. The storm raged on outside, but within the stone walls, held by ancient craft and resonant will, there was only the deep, complex lullaby of endurance, the rhythmic interplay of contained fury and profound calm pulling him towards the worn stool by the forge, the strain of maintaining the field a deep, bone-wearying counterpoint to the storm's fading roar. Chapter 30, The Calm After. The storm spent its fury by dawn, leaving behind a world washed clean and gasping. Sunlight, sharp and clear, streamed through breaks in the ragged clouds, sparkling on countless water droplets clinging to pine needles and grass blades. The air was cool, crisp, and vibrantly alive with the scent of soaked earth, bruised greenery, and wet stone. Inside Eldrin's workshop, the resonant sanctuary settled back into its profound quiet, but changed, deepened by the trial. The spirit-calming sword's hum felt richer, more solid, its grounding note resonating with the memory of anchored stone. The rider's stone pulsed with a serene, steady light, its golden warmth feeling earned, radiating a profound calm after the psychic storm. The void iron shield boss's silence felt even deeper, a well of stillness that had absorbed and transmuted violence into peace. The sentinel ward outside thrummed a strong, satisfied note, its roots having held firm against the torrent. The artifacts seemed to hum with a quiet contentment, their resonances subtly interwoven now in a more complex, resilient harmony, tested and proven. The usual sounds, the soft crackle of the banked forge, the distant rush of the still swollen creek, returned, but felt softer, more integrated into the sanctuary's fabric. Eldrin moved slowly, the deep weariness from channeling the resonant defense lingering in his bones. He performed simple, grounding tasks, wiping down his anvil with an oiled rag, the smooth metal cool beneath his hand, rearranging jars of exotic powders on their shelves, their vibrant colors seeming brighter in the clean morning light, refilling the water bucket from the now clear stream outside, the cold water shocking his hands awake. The damp iron's lesson lingered, the pendant was gone, but the principle remained, the power of contained null, perhaps a small setting of it beneath the anvil base, to absorb stray, discordant vibrations during forging. He filed the thought away. For now, there was only the deep, resonant peace after the storm. The workshop felt like a living thing, breathing slowly, its stone walls radiating coolness, the artifacts humming their layered song of protection, endurance, and profound stillness. The warmth near the forge was comforting, not oppressive. The scent of wet stone from outside mingled cleanly with the familiar workshop aromas. Eldrin sat on his worn stool, a cup of strong, bitter tea warming his hands, steam curling into the sunbeam. He watched the dust motes dance, slower now in the artifact calmed air, the rhythmic pulse of the rider's stone, the deep, unwavering hum of the sword, the profound silence of the shield boss, and the satisfied thrum of the ward wove together into a tapestry of sound and stillness so deep, so complete, it felt like the mountain itself breathing. The immense quiet wasn't empty, but full of resilience, of contained power, of hard-won peace. It settled over him like a physical weight, warm and comforting. The rhythmic symphony a profound lullaby for a keeper in his sanctuary. His eyelids growing heavy as the sunbeam crept slowly across the floor. The storm's fury a memory absorbed into the enduring resonance of stone, steel, and silence.